You can find many picturesque lakes in Louisiana, but one of them stands out among all the others. This deep lake is calm and beautiful, but its origin is closely connected with the story of a large-scale disaster that changed the entire ecosystem. A catastrophe that people managed to miraculously survive. And this disaster happened because of a mistake of just one person. To discover the incredible history of Lake Peigneur, let's move back in time to more than 40 years ago. So, it's 1980, early morning of November the 21st. Several workers start their shift. They continue searching for oil. A drill on an oil rig in the middle of the small Lake Peigneur is an important part of this process. The depth of this lake is about 11 feet. If a grown-up person stands on its bottom and raises their hands, their fingers will reach the surface of the water. Everything goes without problems at first, but then the drill stops. It seems to have jammed at the bottom. Workers try to free the drill, but they can't do it. The engine gets overloaded, and people hear a few pops coming from below. At this moment, the entire rig begins to lean toward the water. The workers on the platform realize that something terrible is happening, so they run to the shore. A strong rumble comes next. The colossal $5 million drilling rig, with a height of a 15-story building, is slowly sinking into the water. But the lake's depth is no greater than a 1-story building. How is it possible? Imagine the water leaving your bathtub through the drain hole. The same thing is happening to the lake now. The drill has punched a small hole in the walls of a salt mine, whose tunnels run through the rock under the lake. And now, millions of gallons of water are pouring into these tunnels. The created pressure is 10 times as great as that in a fire hydrant stream. The miners find out about the disaster. While the water is flooding the tunnels, they're trying to evacuate from the mine. 50 people are making their way through the water and mud using mine carts. A slow elevator can only lift 8 people at a time. It takes 7 approaches to evacuate all the miners. Can you imagine how the people at the end of the line feel? The devastating flood is behind you, and several dozen people and 1 slow elevator are ahead. Fortunately, all the people manage to escape. The water displaces the air from the mine, compressing it. First, it breaks through all the tunnels, and then it comes out from the ground in the form of geysers. But the disaster doesn't end there. A large funnel forms in the middle of the lake. The hole is expanding, pulling more water inside. The land around the lake begins to crumble and fall into the mine. Along with the soil, the funnel pulls in 11 barges, a tugboat, the entire oil platform, and many trees. The whole beach around the lake disappears. There's so much water in the salt cave that the direction of the flow of the nearest river changes. Now, not only the lake, but also the water from the surrounding area is flooding the mine. The funnel is expanding. From the side, you can see the formation of a massive waterfall with a height of 164 feet. This is the height of a 16-story building. At this moment, it's the highest waterfall in Louisiana. Fortunately, the destruction doesn't last long. 2 days have passed. The mine is completely flooded. The funnel has disappeared. The water calms down. Several days ago, it was a shallow lake. Now it has a new bottom, located at a depth of 200 feet. This changes the ecosystem forever. New species of fish and animals appear there. The drilling company paid a fine of $45 million to compensate for the damage to all flooded enterprises. Of course, people investigated the cause of this disaster. It turned out that the engineer made a mistake in the maps. He used incorrect calculations to select the drilling coordinates and got to the salt mine. There is another lake with a huge funnel inside, and it's also artificial. But this time, people created it on purpose. Welcome to California, to Lake Berryessa. Previously, there was a small farming town of Monticello near the lake. In the last century, people built a dam here. But during the rainy season, the water level in the lake rose and poured over the dam's edges. Water flooded the land and washed away roads. you need to make the dam even higher to solve the problem, right? This is quite logical, but the town's engineers thought of something better. They dug a hole near the lake and covered its insides with concrete. It looks like a wide circular tunnel leading into the ground. During the rainy season, the level of the water rises high enough to reach the pit, and millions of gallons of water pour into it. It resembles a giant drain hole in the bathroom. All the water entering the hole travels through a horizontal tunnel and gets into the nearest bay. This is an effective and practical invention and an excellent attraction for many tourists. Skateboarders also like to hang out here. When the water level is low, they gather at the bay, near the place where the water flows out. The round tunnel is an excellent playground for skateboarding. We're moving to the desert of Yemen. There, we're also looking for a hole, but without a lake this time. This hole, the size of a basketball court, is in the middle of the desert. Scientists still don't know what's at the bottom of the hole or what formed it, but the locals are sure this pit is a portal to the underground world where evil spirits live. Even if you don't believe in all this, the giant hole in Yemen can still scare you. Sometimes, strange, frightening sounds come from the depth of this black abyss. And there's always an unpleasant smell of rotten eggs wafting out of there. The hole is so dark, it absorbs sunlight. You won't see anything, even if you point a flashlight inside. People have studied this place with the help of powerful optical lenses and drones, but they couldn't see anything except the frightening darkness. From a distance, this place looks like a blob of black paint in the middle of a golden sandy canvas. Even now, the giant hole in Yemen is one of the most poorly studied and mysterious places on Earth. But recently, a group of brave people got down to its bottom. They found stalactites, snakes, and even waterfalls there. Scientists are trying to figure out how the hole appeared and how old it is. Some say that the hole was caused by construction works when geologists were drilling the soil in search of minerals. The drilling process made the surface of the ground collapse. And now, let's visit another famous hole hidden under a huge amount of water. It's the Mariana Trench. This is the deepest pit on Earth, located in the western Pacific Ocean near the Mariana Islands. It's so deep, it can fit 1.5 Everests. To dive to the bottom, you need special equipment that can withstand intense water pressure. It should be a sturdy bath escape with an ample supply of oxygen. It's expensive, but the trip is worth it. In the Mariana Trench, you can meet unique, strange creatures you will never see on the surface or in some other region of the ocean. Toxic crayfish and microorganisms feeding on a substance that looks like oil live here. You can meet fish with transparent bodies and see their organs and skeleton. Creepy, toothy monsters similar to anglerfish can swim by. These creatures seem fragile and harmless. But look at yourself. You're inside a bath escape made of alloys of several metals. Water pressure can turn an ordinary car into flatbread here. And these fish with transparent bodies swim as if they're just hanging out in the pool.
There's a lake in the heart of Asia that holds 1/5 of all the world's liquid freshwater. It's more than all the 5 Great Lakes have together. Even if all the rivers on our planet suddenly changed their direction and set on a mission to drain this lake, it would take them a whole year to finish the job. I'm talking about the deepest lake in the world, Lake Baikal. If you decide to go all the way down to its deepest point, prepare for a journey of almost 5,400 feet. The descent takes several hours, but the rift floor of the lake is way deeper, between 5 to 7 miles beneath the surface. It means it could be even further down than the Challenger Deep, which is the deepest known place on Earth. The amount of water it has would be enough for everyone on Earth to have something to drink for up to 50 years. This mighty giant of a lake replenishes its water completely every 383 years. Baikal has a great delivery crew of over 300 rivers and streams, bringing their waters right in. And only one river flows out of Baikal, the Angara, which is headed straight for the Arctic Ocean. Baikal isn't only the deepest, but also the oldest existing freshwater lake in the world. It formed at least 25 million years ago. It all began when the Earth's crust decided to play Tetris and created the lake and the surrounding mountains. At some point, Baikal must have been just a humble riverbed, but then tremors and fractures shook the Earth, and the distance between the shores got bigger. Water levels rose thanks to the melting glaciers. Then, several lakes formed and later merged into one. Baikal is one of around 20 lakes in the world that are older than 1 million years. And since it wasn't disturbed by glacial periods, it's a perfect research ground for scientists. Its deep-drilled core sediments can tell a lot about the climate of our planet in different periods. Since Baikal is in a rift basin with 2,000 seismic tremors per year, the lake is deepening and still growing in size. Its shores drift apart at around the same rate as South America and Africa are moving away from each other, so it has all the potential to become an ocean. Another thing Baikal has in common with the oceans is that it has water rich in oxygen, even at its lowest depths. This is one of the reasons why the fauna of the lake is so incredibly rich. It's home to over 2,500 various animals and 1,000 plant varieties. Around half of them are unique and only exist in this area, like the endemic algae, the Baikal omul fish, and the Baikal oilfish. There are also some bears, elk, and lynx living on its shores. They must appreciate the fact that the temperatures around the lake are always higher than the rest of Siberia, thanks to its huge water mass. Most Baikal dwellers prefer to stick to the bottom of the lake, but there's one brave guy you'll meet if you decide to visit. Meet the Baikal seal, also known as Nerpa. It's the only true freshwater seal in the world. Nerpa's eyes are so cute it nearly landed the part of Puss in Boots in Shrek. Nerpa in Boots sounds good to me. These huge eyes are there to help them follow their favorite pelagic fish underwater. There are other seal kinds that can handle freshwater or use it to breathe, but these cuties spend their entire lives in it. But wait, how did seals, which are supposed to be oceanic creatures, end up in a lake miles and miles away from the sea? About 400,000 years ago, during the Pleistocene era, these adventurous creatures traveled up the river and drainage systems that connected Lake Baikal to the Arctic Ocean. The ringed seal that still lives in the Arctic is believed to be the Baikal seal's closest ancestor. Today, Baikal seals are confined to their freshwater home because of the changes in waterways. And they seem to be pretty happy with their home as they can choose from a huge variety of food to eat. The seals mostly hang out in the north and central areas of the lake, but move south in the winter. The lake gets covered with ice, which they use as a chill-out zone, just like their oceanic cousins use rocks or the beach. Since at least 1969, Lake Baikal has had some mysterious ice rings pop up randomly here and there. At some point, they got so big that the astronauts even spotted them from space. The rings usually appear in late April, but can be there in January or May. Scientists couldn't crack the code on how these rings form for a while. They had all sorts of theories, and the most popular involved methane gas bubbles from the lake's depths. But then, scientists noticed that some of the rings were in shallower waters, where gas emissions don't happen. So, an international team of scientists decided to solve the mystery. They traveled to Lake Baikal, drilled holes in the ice, and dropped sensors into the water. In 2016, when they started the research, they heard that 2 vans had gotten stuck in the mysterious ice rings. Once they had analyzed the data from the sensors, it turned out that the secret behind the rings was warm eddies flowing clockwise under its ice cover. The currents were less intense in the center of the eddies, so the ice above them was thicker at the edges. The waters of the lake are so clear that you can see some extremely deep parts up to over 130 feet down. This is thanks to the surrounding mountains that send off melting ice right in. Plankton that live in the lake also helps clean the floating debris. When this crystal clear water freezes, it forms an unusually thick and see-through layer of ice. The wind likes to play sculptor on Baikal and creates one-of-a-kind pieces of art here. It picks up water, which, of course, freezes into the most unusual designs. Frozen bubbles and icicles you've never seen before. The location and geography of the lakes and the cycles of melting and refreezing create the perfect conditions for this ice workshop. And you can even see rocks that seem to be floating. The bottom of the rock freezes to the surface of the ice. Then, the strong winds wear away the surroundings, leaving a perfect pedestal for the rock. If you think the floating rocks look eerie, how about Baikal's version of the Loch Ness Monster? The local Buryat people have a legend about the water dragon master that lives in the lake. A dragon is believed to be the most powerful creature living on Earth in Asian mythology. They believe there are 4 dragons living in the 4 seas, each responsible for one of the cardinal directions. Baikal is the North Sea in this story. The image of this dragon is supposedly etched in ancient petroglyphs on the cliffs of Baikal. There's also a hefty stone slab that looks like a monument dated back to somewhere between the 3rd and the 9th century BCE, depicting a mysterious water monster. Imagine the stories this stone could tell, echoing the whispers of a bygone era and leaving us to unravel the enigma of the Baikal cliffs. The legend says that a local warrior was chasing the dragon. He finally reached the largest Baikal island of Alkan. He was ready to face and defeat the dragon, but the beast turned into a beautiful girl, and they got married. That's one unusual twist to a classic defeat the dragon and take the girl story. So, local legends describe that dragon as a giant sturgeon with an almost gator-like snout and armored body. In reality, the mythical monster must be one of the many huge fish living in the lake. They can afford to grow to several feet in length thanks to the high levels of oxygen in the water. Beluga sturgeon can weigh several thousands of pounds, lives up to 50 or 60 years, and never stops growing. Lake Michigan is one of the largest and most mysterious freshwater lakes in the United States. And now, deep inside it, scientists have stumbled upon something unexplainable. Vast, round craters scattered all across the lake's floor. It all started in 2022. A team of researchers wanted to map the lake's bottom and look for some shipwrecks. At first, they were sure it's going to be just some typical rocky terrain or sandy patches. But what they saw on their sonar screens stopped them cold. Strange, circular shapes that looked almost too perfect to be natural. They were hiding about 500 feet beneath the surface, in places where the water turns dark and impenetrable. Those guys are huge, ranging from 300 to 600 feet wide. They also plunge nearly 40 feet deep. And there are dozens of them, neatly arranged like some footprints. But the team had no idea what these things were. Then, in August 2024, the mystery only deepened. Using a remotely operated vehicle, they got a closer look at these formations. There were about 40 of them. No one had ever seen anything quite like this before in the Great Lakes. What could have created those craters? Could they be ancient? Perhaps remnants of some geological event lost to time? If that's the case, it's weird how long these holes have likely been sitting there, undisturbed. Theories started popping up. One possibility was that they could be sinkholes or dolines. Those are basically holes that suddenly appear in the ground when the surface layer collapses. The rock beneath the surface, often made of limestone, gets slowly dissolved by water over time, creating voids underground. When the surface of those voids can no longer hold its own weight, it caves in, and this forms a hole. Think of it like when you poke a straw through the lid of a drink. Sinkholes can be small dips or huge, spanning up to 2,000 feet. They can happen gradually or all at once. Sometimes they can swallow entire cars or even buildings. And Lake Michigan sits on limestone bedrock. It erodes pretty easily when water flows through it. sinkholes like these have already been found in Lake Huron, and they look kinda similar. But there are some plot holes, no pun intended, with this theory. For example, it's wild how they all would be so huge. It's also weird and pretty rare for sinkholes to occur in a lake bed. They also kinda resemble a straight pattern. They seem to extend generally southward, forming a loose line, which is pretty weird. If these are sinkholes, then they're definitely not playing the usual geological rules. Though it might be some new, unusual process at play beneath the lake's surface that we haven't discovered yet. There's another theory though: glaciers. Glaciers are wild rivers of ice. They covered much of the Earth during the last ice age, and they're incredibly powerful. While they might move slowly, sometimes only a few inches per day, they have such immense weight that they can reshape entire landscapes over thousands of years. Glaciers can grind and scoop the land beneath them. They're basically like colossal bulldozers. Their weight, combined with the slow but steady movement, grounds down everything beneath them: rocks, soil, even bedrock. This can create deep gouges in the Earth's surface, called glacial troughs. During the last ice age, there were lots of glaciers all over the northern US, including the Great Lakes region. If they moved across what is now Lake Michigan, they could have carved out these deep holes. Glaciers often move in a pretty straight path. As they move, they cause terrain to erode, but the resulting erosion varies based on terrain. Sometimes there are places where the bedrock is softer or fractured, and these places are more easily carved and crushed by the glacier. That could explain why some holes could be bigger and deeper than others. Harder bedrock is less affected. But usually this leads to rounded, crescent-shaped depressions known as chatter marks. Those marks are more like grooves rather than circular, big craters like those in Lake Michigan. Once the glaciers melted, the Great Lakes themselves formed. If the craters were formed by them, they may have filled with water, becoming part of the Michigan Lake. Though this theory is more like a speculation, so we need more evidence. But there's another layer to this mystery. The craters are not just curious geological formations. They actually may hold valuable clues about early life on Earth. Parts of Lake Michigan, especially dark ones, are relatively low in oxygen. It's like a lighter version of deep ocean environments that often have very little of this element. For example, hydrothermal vents deep in the ocean, underwater openings in the Earth's crust with some hot, mineral-rich water that are often very low in oxygen. But some organisms love places like these. For example, opossum shrimp. Teeny tiny shrimp-like creatures that love cold, deep waters. They get their name because they have a pouch to carry their young until they're ready to be on their own, like an opossum. Or deep-water sculpin fish, small bottom-dwelling fish that also enjoys cold lakes. They're well adapted to living in dark waters and usually stay close to the lake bed. And weird organisms like invasive quagga mussels, which kinda look like shells. These are small freshwater mussels that have spread there to the Great Lakes. They attach themselves to hard surfaces and can cause problems for ecosystems by competing with native species for food and space. All these guys could be in Lake Michigan, and even more. There might be microbes or even bacteria that are specially adapted to these harsh conditions, just like it was in Lake Huron. There's only a handful of creatures that could survive deep within these craters, and studying them could give us insight into how life once flourished in Earth's ancient, oxygen-poor oceans. That's because it's in places similar to these, where some of the earliest life forms thrived. Early Earth had an atmosphere with little oxygen, although it was much more hot and ancient microbes adapted to this. The Great Lakes, especially Lake Michigan, have always had a bit of a ghostly reputation. Like even this mission was organized to study the shipwrecks. There were about 6,000 of them in the Great Lakes. many of these wrecks are still sitting on the lake beds, preserved by the cold, fresh waters. And shipwrecks aren't the only strange things tied to the Great Lakes. Over the years, there have been stories of unexplained disappearances. Boats and even planes have vanished without a trace. The lakes, often calm on the surface, can suddenly turn dangerous with unpredictable storms and massive waves, leading to these mysterious events. Not even mentioning all the creepy stuff people notice there over the centuries, such as ghostly lights above water or bizarre weather patterns like eerie, sudden fogs that seem to appear out of nowhere. In 2007, they even discovered some prehistoric structure that looks like Stonehenge there. Well, it was way smaller, but still. It lay about 40 feet below the surface in the heart of Grand Traverse Bay, and it's speculated to be about 9,000 years old, way older than Stonehenge. Looks like this is a print of those who lived in the area thousands of years ago. These massive stones are arranged in a careful, winding pattern stretching over a mile. They range in size from basketballs to compact cars. But one, in particular, stands out. A boulder 3.5 to 4 feet tall, 5 feet wide. It's etched with the image of a mastodon, a creature that roamed the earth about 11,000 years ago before it went extinct. It probably sank there during the end of the last ice age we mentioned. This period had reshaped the region. This place is underwater now, but back in the day, it was still dry land. So the stones were probably created by people who lived there, though we're not sure why. Were they used as hunting blinds? Or was it some sort of an ancient calendar? Who knows? Only about 15% of the Great Lakes floors have been explored. Now, scientists are gearing up for a deeper dive into this mystery, both literally and figuratively. They want to analyze the lake beds surrounding the craters, hoping that maybe something in the environment around them might have caused them to appear. They have initiatives like Lakebed 2030. These missions should map the entire underwater landscape. This would help us learn tons of interesting stuff about Lake Michigan and our planet's past. Who knows what other secrets these dark waters hide?
The tranquil-looking Lake Manaun in Cameroon is one real trickster. At first, it may seem calm and peaceful, but this lake is like a fiery volcano waiting to erupt at any moment. And it doesn't even have the decency to give any warning signs. Its last outburst was way back in 1984, which caused a bang that left everyone in awe. It's like the lake's got a soda can mechanism down there, or in technical terms, it experiences a limnic eruption. This rare phenomenon happens when gas from deep under the water suddenly erupts. Certain things have to happen prior for it to occur though. There are some things you can look out for if you feel worried. For starters, if the vegetation around a lake looks a bit flattened, it might have previously experienced a limnic eruption. That's because the water can pop up with a lot of pressure and overflow. The water being a bit warmer all of a sudden can also mean you need to head to safety. There's this lake in Kazakhstan that looks like a total disaster on the surface, with empty tree trunks sticking out of the water. Not cute. But if you're feeling daring and want to take a swim, you'll be transported to a whole new world. Its story goes back to the year 1911, when there was a landslide that filled the valley with rainwater, completely submerging a local forest. As mesmerizing as it might sound, it's no easy task to dive in. The water is freezing, and all the algae, plants, and submerged trees make it a risky obstacle course. Have you heard about this scorching lake on the sunny Caribbean island of Dominica? The water around the edges is at a sweltering 180 to 197 degrees Fahrenheit. No wonder no one has the guts to measure the middle. It's that hot. Sure, the heat may go down once in a while, but who knows when those waters will start boiling again? Plus, this place is full of nasty gases like carbon dioxide. Because of them, let's just say it doesn't exactly smell like roses. more like rotten eggs. So unless you want to end up looking like a boiled lobster, I suggest you stay away from these waters. If you're planning a trip to Tanzania, you might want to think twice before diving into Natron Lake. Sure, it's got a beautiful reddish hue, but that's thanks to some bacteria that call this lake home. And don't even get me started on the pH levels. They're so high they might even strip the color off your swimsuit. But hey, at least the flamingos like it there. Those acid-loving birds are living their best lives in a group with 2.5 million of their closest feathered friends. How come these birds manage to thrive there, you might wonder? Well, no predators means no stress, which equals easy breeding. They also love feasting on that fancy bacteria, which makes the water all pink. You may think that Belize's Great Blue Hole is just calling out to you with its stunning blue hues and close proximity to land. But hold your flippers, because there's a catch. Sure, it's about 900 feet across and 300 feet deep, but lurking beneath the surface is a confusing patterns of tunnels filled with coral and wildlife. It's like finding your way through a maze at a theme park, but with more fish. And as if that wasn't tricky enough, the deeper you go, the fewer creatures you'll encounter. Why, you ask? Well, it turns out that there's a sneaky layer of hydrogen sulfide that covers the entire width of the hole, depriving any living creature of oxygen. Plan on heading to the Devil's Kettle waterfall in Minnesota? This one won't necessarily be dangerous for you, but you might end up losing some of your stuff out there if you don't pay attention. That's because this waterfall experiences a phenomenon that's a real head-scratcher for geologists. One part of the waterfall flows normally, while the other part disappears into a big ol' hole. And get this, not even ping pong balls can make it out. Scientists decided to investigate, and they went all out, even using GPS trackers. Initially, they couldn't figure it out until they realized that the hole acts like a giant blender. That water is getting spun around so hard, it's basically obliterating everything in its path. They finally measured the water volume and saw that it was still there, so it was supposed to come back out somewhere. The most likely explanation is that the water is probably re-emerging in the stream located beneath the waterfall. You've surely heard of the Bermuda Triangle. I mean, that's old news. But let me tell you about the Pacific's very own watery trap called the Devil's Sea. It's like a game of hide and seek, but with ships. They disappear and we can never find them again. The Kayo Maru No. 5 was on a mission to investigate a volcanic island, but the trip ended up being just one way. Add a dash of detective work to the subject and you'll find out the whole story about the Devil's Sea is more myth and less fact. But it doesn't make it any less interesting. If you're still interested in some mysterious ship disappearance, then Lake Superior is the place you'll want to read about. Even the most skilled scuba divers can't find a single piece of all of those lost vessels. The main character of this lake story was a ship called the SS Edmund Fitzgerald, the biggest one to sink in the Great Lakes. To this day, people aren't sure why it sank. So, you're planning a little swim in one of the Great Lakes, huh? Well, might want to steer clear of Lake Michigan, unless you're really into extreme water sports. This bad boy has a reputation for being the most dangerous of the bunch, thanks to some sneaky undercurrents that like to snatch unsuspecting swimmers. Make sure to watch out for those pesky piers and docks that only add to the lake's swimming difficulty. If you're feeling adventurous, you might want to skip the months of October or November. This is when the temperatures start to drop and the currents get extra wild. Tibet has its dangerous lake too, and at first glance, it's gorgeous. But don't get too excited. It's got a salt content so high that nothing can survive in it. Some villagers around there actually consider it to be tainted with some sort of substance. The cherry on top? Other locals believe there's a selfish creature living in the lake who's hogging up all the space for itself. No wonder its nickname is Darkness. No list of dangerous waters is complete without Lake Victoria, the big kahuna of African lakes and the third biggest in the whole wide world. But beware, not all its waters are safe for us humans. Some regions can be real troublemakers because this lake has its own personal climate. And what does that mean? Mostly that you can't trust the weather here one bit. You could be soaking up some sweet rays one second, and the next you're running from a torrential downpour. Unless you want to be caught swimming in a storm, steer clear of this moody lake. You might have already seen pictures of Lake Peigneur. It's like a giant pool of grapefruit juice in Australia. Scientists have been scratching their heads over it for centuries because they still can't figure out with certainty why it's pink. But here's the kicker, it's not the only one. Yep, there's another pink lake out there called Lake Retba. Both of these lakes have super high salt content, which is apparently a magnet for some fancy microorganisms. These little guys produce beta-carotene, you know, the substance that's in carrots, and that's what gives these lakes their groovy colors. Interested in swimming in this lake? It's not technically dangerous because the water has such high amounts of salt in it. There are no scary sea creatures to worry about. But, on the other hand, you'll need to make sure you don't accidentally take a sip. Drinking highly salted water will make you dehydrate faster than a plant in the desert.
A strange lake appeared in India 52,000 years ago. It was formed here literally out of nowhere. I recall it was a Wednesday. Anyway, for tens of thousands of years, people came up with various scary stories about the lake. Some locals believe this place was cursed. Others think that the lake's bottom hides the gateway to the underworld. But those are all legends. The real reason for the appearance of this Lonar Lake is even more surprising. At first, scientists were sure that the lake was an ancient crater of a long-extinct volcano. It's in a balsam field made of 65-million-year-old volcanic rock. But then, geologists conducted a detailed analysis of the soil and water and found that Lonar Lake had a space origin. Geologists found a unique glass inside the lake that forms only with a strong impact and energy release. 52,000 years ago, a huge meteorite weighing 2 million tons fell into this place. It was almost 6 times heavier than the Empire State Building. The striking power was so high that the volcanic rock melted and turned into glass. Perhaps the bottom of this lake still contains particles of this giant meteorite that flew to us from the distant space depths. Okay, we have a lake created by a space object more than 50,000 years ago. But even this is not the strangest thing about it. In 2020, the locals noticed that Lonar Lake had turned pink. In just a few days, the salt water mysteriously changed its color. Biologists and geologists immediately took water samples to the Scientific Research Center. The detailed analysis showed that the water contained an increased level of unique microbes. They accumulate on the surface and emit some pink pigment. Soon these microbes settled to the bottom, and the lake became transparent again. Also, rains help the water go back to its usual appearance. These microbes color the lake and make the pink plumage of flamingos even brighter. The birds get food from the Lonar Lake and absorb these pink bacteria. Now, Lonar Lake is a popular place among tourists. But this is not the only thing that may surprise you in India. Our next stop is a small village with about 2,600 people located in a hot rainforest. The locals are very hospitable. They welcome not only tourists, but also one of the most venomous reptiles on the planet. King cobras are crawling in almost every house in this village. Locals are happy to see them as if they were their pets. People share water and food with these animals. They even give the reptiles a special corner where they can relax from the scorching sun. Ah, cobras crawl in houses, schools, and even on the streets. Humans and reptiles are used to each other and feel safe. There has never been a case of a cobra attack in the village. It's the only place in the world where these venomous reptiles live in such harmony with people. Now, imagine a town that consists of many little united villages. The residents are all engaged in agriculture. They know how to extract water from ground rocks, and they bargain well. The town has been thriving for several centuries, and people live happily in it. Then, one day, everything changes. All the residents quickly pack up their stuff and run away from their homes. Overnight, the town becomes abandoned. It is a real story that happened in the state of Rajasthan in 1825. And still, no one knows why the people disappeared from there. The most popular version says that the cruel local ruler collected large taxes from the locals. Then he fell in love with the daughter of the chief of this town and threatened that he would collect extra taxes if the girl refused to be his wife. Citizens decided to support the woman and her father and left their homes in one day. This town is still empty, but the locals from the nearest cities are afraid to approach. Our next stop is the state of Maharashtra. There's a small village there with very positive people. They go to stores, cafes, schools, and banks. Everything here seems quite ordinary, and you wouldn't notice what's so special about this place. But just wait for the night to come. People go to sleep and no one locks their houses. There are no locks at all in this village. The door of any building is always open here. The owners leave the shops, cafes, and libraries open. When locals go to work, they don't lock up their homes either. They don't hide money and jewelry. The reason for this is the complete absence of thefts. The villagers are sure that anyone can get into serious trouble for stealing. According to a legend, about 300 years ago, after prolonged rains and floods, a large black stone slab appeared in the center of the village. This slab symbolized an Indian mythical creature that watched over the locals. At some point, people stopped locking their houses because they knew that no one would dare to commit theft in that creature's face. In 2015, a police station was opened here, but almost no one has reported an incident since then. The building doesn't even have doors because the police don't keep anyone there. Another fantastic place in India is a village in the state of Assam. Hundreds of locals prepare here for an unusual celebration every now and then. They arrange a magnificent wedding ceremony. They set the table, dress up in beautiful costumes, and bring gifts. And all this for the newlyweds. But instead of people, frogs get married here. Locals hold weddings for wild frogs to summon rain. The incredible thing is that the ceremony looks just like a real wedding. The fun can last all day until late at night. Now, there's one dangerous and inaccessible island in India. You can find it in the Bay of Bengal. It's called the North Sentinel. It's a small piece of land that looks like a tropical paradise. But you won't be able to get there. Since 1956, nobody can travel to this place. The Coast Guard is always sailing around and patrolling the area. The reason for this is the local Sentinelese tribe. This tribe lives isolated from the whole world. They don't know about modern technologies, the internet, or television. For centuries, the Sentinelese have lived on their own, away from civilization. And the people from India want to keep it that way. Anyone who approaches their island is welcomed by the tribe with a flurry of spears and arrows. And it doesn't matter if you're coming by boat or helicopter. Another reason why you can't get on the island is the Sentinelese immune system. The Coast Guard is trying to protect the local tribe from possible diseases and infections that outsiders can bring with them. The locals have no immunity from the flu or even a simple cold. They don't know what that is. Also, there are coral reefs and limestone around the island, which significantly complicates the passage of large ships. Despite all the prohibitions, many people tried to get to the island. In 1880, one officer accidentally discovered this island. He went ashore and found a noble soil ideal for growing coconut palms. The officer also noticed several huts on the island, but didn't dare meet the locals. Explorers and travelers presented the islanders with fish as a gift many times. The locals accepted it, asked for more, but still didn't let them approach their houses. It was also challenging to make friends with the tribe because they communicate in one of the most difficult languages to learn in the world. Scientists and linguists have been studying this language for decades. At the end of the 20th century, outsiders made some progress in building a connection with the tribe. In 1991, a team of anthropologists invited the islanders aboard a large ship. They gave bags of coconuts to tribe members. This may be where the phrase "left holding the bag" came from. Or not. Otherwise, let's just leave these folks alone, shall we? Boom! This word isn't nearly enough to illustrate the explosion, the most powerful one you've ever seen. And what's most important, it's a lake that's just blown up. Hey, all you wanted to do is light up some fireworks in this picturesque place. But you must have totally missed the danger strictly no fire warning sign along the way. And now, the wall of fuming water is quickly closing in on you. But first, let's rewind to the beginning of the whole thing. You're in Alberta, Canada, and have just arrived to Abraham Lake for a hike of your life. The lake is frozen, and the view is awesome. Those bubbles under the ice look like hundreds of frozen jellyfish. In reality, they're made of methane, a toxic and highly flammable gas produced by bacteria living on the bottom of the lake. That's why the sign is there. If you so much as light a match on this ice, it might set the whole thing on fire. Luckily, you've taken note of it on the way here and put away the fireworks you wanted to light up. Another place, another time. Another lake. This one's not frozen. In fact, it probably hasn't seen a winter since the last ice age. We're in Cameroon now, and the place is called Lake Nyos. It looks peaceful, but make no mistake, its orange-brown waters hide a deadly secret. The lake rests atop a highly volatile area, and the fissures in its bottom let out massive amounts of carbon dioxide. When the ground shifts, this gas spills out of the lake and flows miles around it. The concentrations are so high that one breath of it would make you faint, and you'd have zero chance of waking up. You get the picture. But the most sinister thing about it is that the CO2 doesn't have a smell or color, so you wouldn't even see it coming. Local authorities have set up a system of pipes that drains the gas from the lake, making it relatively safe for people and animals in the vicinity. And another toxic lake, Kivu, on the border of Congo and Rwanda, has even been made to provide energy for millions of people thanks to its gases. While we're in Africa, the Danakil Depression in Ethiopia is also worth a blood-curdling visit. Dubbed the hottest place on Earth, it sure lives up to its name. The ravine is peppered with extremely hot springs, toxic acid ponds, and active volcanoes. The landscape is surreal, to say the least, and is probably the only inhabited place on Earth where no life can exist. The Afar people live here all year round and gather salt around the springs for trade, while scientists couldn't find any evidence of microbial life in those. Humans are notorious for settling in places most would gladly avoid. Take Mount Tambora in Indonesia. Thousands of people have been living on and around its slopes for centuries until the fateful day in 1815. Tambora is a volcano, and that year it decided to erupt, resulting in a blast that obliterated everything on the island and was heard almost 1,000 miles away. It spewed out so much volcanic ash that it fell in sheets on the surrounding isles and caused a year without a summer in the whole northern hemisphere. It was the most powerful eruption in the last 10,000 years, and Mount Tambora became as much as 5,000 feet lower after it. But back to our time. There's an island you won't be allowed to visit, but I bet you wouldn't want to anyway. The Snake Island in Brazil is home to thousands of snakes, as its name implies. The moment you step on its soil, you're in grave danger of being bitten by a viper. The island is also the only place you can meet a golden lancehead viper, the encounter of a lifetime, literally. This place is so dangerous that Brazil has banned tourists and any other visitors from it unconditionally. Okay, gotta go. Now, get your warmest clothes on and don't forget a fur face mask. We're going to Omayak in Russia. It's a small town in the far north that's often called the coldest place on the planet where people still live. The only place with a lower average temperature is Antarctica, and that's saying something. In the winter, if you so much as forget to put on a sweater, and a fur coat, you'll get frozen to the bone in mere seconds. Temperatures here drop to the chilling minus 96 degrees Fahrenheit. Fresh fruit turns to chunks of ice in minutes, and becomes so hard you could drive nails into wood with an apple here. Now, before you freeze in place, let's go somewhere no boat will take you. The Skeleton Coast in Namibia. No, really, you can only drive or fly in here because boats and ships won't go near the place. The waters are treacherous, sudden gales toss vessels around, and sharp rocks hiding underwater are all too happy to ram into their hulls. The coast itself stretches for hundreds of miles and is divided into southern and northern parts. Visitors on all-terrain vehicles are allowed freely into the southern part, but only about 800 people a year can get to the northern one, and only with guided tours. People are known to have been lost in this desert forever, and it's a daunting place to go. It got its name from numerous animal carcasses found here. Still, about 50,000 indigenous people managed to survive in this place, along with adapted animals, lizards, hyenas, and even elephants. Now, you'd expect a living destruction machine anywhere but the heart of Europe. Naples, one of the most famous cities in Italy, is built on top of an active supervolcano. In 2018, scientists noticed this monster of a mountain was building up magma in its depths. They say it isn't likely to erupt in the near future, but there's a smaller yet no less dangerous volcano just a few miles off, the infamous Vesuvius. You might remember it for the immolation of the Roman city of Pompeii about 2,000 years ago. You might, but I wasn't around then. This one has been active for a long while, and both citizens and guests of Naples put their lives at stake every single day they spend in town. But hey, while you're there, try the pizza. Northeast of France is also an unwelcoming place. A chain of areas has been dubbed Zone Rouge, or Red Zone, and declared off-limits since the 1920s. If, by some wild chance, you find yourself in one of these places, you'll only see wilted plants and scorched earth, so much in contrast with the lush landscapes of the rest of the country. The soil and air is so polluted here that people are prohibited to enter for fear of choking. And in any case, nothing can live in the red zone at the time. There's an inhabited island in Japan that was once closed for air travel for 8 years. Miyagi-jima is basically a volcano on whose slopes people live. It has been erupting roughly every 20 years, and the latest eruption was in 2000. The volcano doesn't normally spill lava, but instead it throws out enormous clouds of toxic sulfuric gases. Hey, don't forget your mask. Speaking of which, at the peak of its activity, residents of the island had to wear gas masks at all times, and even years after the eruption, they took those masks with them just in case. Hey, I can relate. Not far from where we've just been, in Kamchatka region of Russia, there's an incredibly beautiful valley in which you don't want to stay for too long. It's ominously called the Valley of Death, and it sits at the base of another active volcano. When the mountain lets out its fumes, spoiler, quite often, the toxic gases, heavier than air, go down its slopes and right into the valley. Small critters have no chance of survival breathing this stuff, and even larger animals and humans will have trouble getting out unscathed. Another deadly vacation destination is Saltstraumen Strait in Norway. It looks serene and beautiful, and you can almost feel it inviting you to take a dip and bathe in its waters. Don't do that though. Every 6 hours, the calm strait turns into a roaring mass dotted with huge and powerful whirlpools. It's all because of a tidal current between two fjords the strait is connecting. Here, on a high tide, the rush of water is too massive for the narrow stream, making it a deadly trap for both swimmers and boats. Now, over in Bolivia, there's a 45 miles long road that only the bravest dare to traverse. Yungas Road goes along the side of a mountain range and is a major attraction for cyclists craving for a thrill. A new passage has been built that bypasses the most dangerous parts of the route, but the original road was very narrow, with the abyss and no guardrails to speak of on one side and a steep slope on the other. Frequent landslides, fog, and rains made cycling here extremely dangerous and unpredictable, which, of course, never stopped adrenaline seekers from all over the world to come here for a bike ride like no other. Finally, if you like hot springs, You might also love a visit to Boiling Lake in Dominica. Located in a national park, it's a cavity filled with constantly boiling water from the rivers in the vicinity. It's kept hot by the extremely hot springs of toxic gas, and the fumes above the surface are also toxic. The lake attracts tourists, but getting too close to it might prove really dangerous. It's known to burst, flooding the surrounding area with clouds of gas.
Let's check out one interesting town surrounded by mountains and woods in upstate New York. This place sits right on a big lake, and the city is called Lake George. People like to come here to go fishing, boating, and take up other water activities. You can meet many fishers, athletes, and a screaming man standing by the shore. Lake George is one of the most popular places in the northern part. Wait a minute, what? A screaming man? What does it mean? Yeah, people come to the shore, look towards the lake and the mountains, and just scream loudly. It looks pretty weird from the outside. Here's a young guy screaming, then he leaves, and a girl stands in his place. She starts screaming too, and then she offers you to do the same. Okay, you come to the spot where she was standing, turn towards the water, and shout. Wow! The sound of your voice echoes back to you. You hear yourself as if the sound wave passed through a giant megaphone. Your scream sounds distorted. It's unbelievable. You get closer to the shore and start screaming again. But this time, the magic is gone. You hear your usual scream. You return to that point, and here's the sound of your cry rising to you again with an echo. But how does this happen? Look where you're standing, the girl tells you. You're standing on a round concrete platform with an engraved image of a compass. Right on the compass, you see a blue map of the lake. In the center of this pattern, two compass lines intersect and form the X symbol. Anyone who stays in this exact spot and shouts towards the lake will hear an incredible echo of their voice. It's as if your scream is coming back to you from another dimension. But the most exciting thing is that people standing nearby don't hear it. They see you as just a screaming person with an ordinary voice. They can hear the echo only in this X spot. Scientists still can't explain this acoustic phenomenon or figure out the reason for this behavior of the sound waves. All they have is guesses and theories. The concrete platform is surrounded by a small curved wall from the lakeside. Some people think that your voice resonates from this wall and creates this sound effect. Many places have similar semicircular walls, but they can't play such an acoustics trick. Another theory says that mountains and water somehow create the echo effect. There's also an old legend according to which a magical creature appeared at this spot. It shouted towards the water, and its wisdom has echoed throughout the lake ever since. I still think the sound resonates from the wall, but let's move on. We have more places to go. The next incredible location we're going to drop by is in California. Welcome to Lake Berryessa. Just stand on the shore and watch. Everything seems normal, beautiful nature, clean, calm water, but there's a huge deep hole in this lake into which millions of cubic feet of water are pouring per second. But don't worry, this is not a natural anomaly or a tunnel to the underworld. It's the glory hole, and people created it. Lake Berryessa is in the area where the farming town of Monticello used to stand. In the last century, people built a dam next to the lake. During the rains, the water level rose and overflowed beyond the edges of the dam. To solve this problem, engineers built a vast hole. To give you an idea of how vast it is, imagine an ant standing on the edge of your bathtub with water flowing through the drain hole. The glory hole is as big for you as the drain hole would be for the ant. The water goes through a long horizontal tunnel and enters the nearest bay. The glory hole is a local attraction and a popular place for tourists. Now let's move to the Caribbean region for another fascinating location. Here, among the clear blue sea, you can find a unique lake on one of the dreamlike islands. Its entire territory looks like a giant concrete platform. But don't swim in it. Steam emanates from the lake's surface because of high temperatures. Almost all the water here is liquid asphalt. Pitch Lake is the largest asphalt deposit in the world. Its depth is 250 feet, which means that a passenger Boeing can fit there in an upright position. Scientists haven't yet studied the lake thoroughly. They think there's a fault in the Earth's crust underneath it. Natural gases and oil pass through this crack and mix with water. Then, all this liquid goes through many chemical reactions and turns into asphalt. The lake contains about 10 million tons of hot material, according to rough estimates. Theoretically, no life can exist in such conditions, but scientists discovered a colony of microbes there. This means that life outside of our planet can exist. Saturn's largest moon, Titan, has many hydrocarbon lakes on its surface, similar to Pitch Lake. And if the simplest forms of life can exist here, in the asphalt lake, they may also survive on Titan. Our next unusual lake is in a pretty unexpected place, in the driest region on Earth. And these are not hot dunes and lifeless plains. This region is in Antarctica. A dry area is not where it's hot, but where there's almost no precipitation. The desert is not heat and sand, but the absence of life. Some areas of Antarctica meet these two criteria. It's so cold here that a mug of tea can freeze in a minute. But the lake we want to see doesn't freeze. Although it's not even a lake, but a pond, because of its tiny size and depth of several inches. It resembles a large puddle of icy water. It doesn't freeze because Don Juan Pond is one of the saltiest reservoirs on the planet. Salt prevents water from turning into ice. But the most interesting thing is the lake's origin. Scientists still don't know how it appeared here. Our next stop is in the southern part of Tunisia. In 2014, a strange lake appeared out of nowhere, right in the middle of the desert. No one knows when the lake was born, since this part of the region is sparsely populated, and people don't live in the area around the lake. Shepherds passing by were the first to have noticed the lake. They told the locals about it. A few hours later, hundreds of people came to the place to swim in the clear, cool water. The lake became a popular place, but after a few days, something strange happened. The water turned dark green. The locals didn't care about this and continued to bathe in the lake. But when scientists and geologists arrived at the place, they immediately declared that the water was dangerous. They said the lake was stagnating. It didn't refresh itself from underground streams, and the rains didn't feed it either. The water became moldy and dirty, and then turned green. The lake contained algae and a lot of harmful bacteria dangerous to the human body. Scientists also found out that the land in this region had phosphate deposits. This substance can decay and become radioactive. But the locals didn't take the scientists' words seriously. Just imagine that you're wandering in the desert under the scorching sun and notice a cool green lake. Few people will refuse to jump in there. The origin of this lake remains a mystery. Some experts think that heavy rains have filled a hole in the ground with water. Water has probably accumulated in the shadow of rocks surrounding the canyon. But another, more frightening theory says that an earthquake formed the lake. The seismic activity must have torn the Earth's crust above the water table. Then, underground springs spilled out of the depths and filled this crevice. This means that all the water that came here can pour back out. Imagine pulling the plug out of the drain hole in a bathtub. Any small earthquake can make the lake's plug fly out. In this case, the gap can take all the water back underground. So let's hope there won't be any swimmers in the lake at that moment.
Now, the Mariana Trench is the deepest and probably the most enigmatic place on Earth, whatever that means. Bizarre creatures such as deep-sea anglerfish, frilled and goblin sharks, barrel-eyed fish, hatchetfish, live in a crescent-shaped trench in the western Pacific. Just 3 people have ever descended down the Challenger Deep in the southern end of the Mariana Trench. There, at a depth of almost 11,000 feet, vents are bubbling up carbon dioxide and liquid sulfur. Mud volcanoes erupt under the pressure 1,000 times greater than at the surface. And so, it's no place I want to go. So bye!
Get back in there.
Alright, since you clicked, yeah, you're about to visit places no less mysterious and creepy than the Mariana Trench. Your first stop is Mexico, the Yucatan Peninsula to be precise. See those bottomless sinkholes filled with crystal clear water? It's fresh water that overlies salt water seeping from the sea. The sinkholes are called cenotes. The Mayans believe these natural wells were the gateways to the underworld. Thousands of cenotes, created by collapsed limestone bedrock, form one of the world's longest underwater cave systems. You can easily get lost in this tangled, mysterious network. Now it's time to visit the Caribbean. There, you'll get to a depth of almost 8,000 feet to see the Van Dam vent field. The hydrothermal vents fire out streams of muddy, scalding water with a temperature reaching 400 degrees Fahrenheit. That's almost enough to bake a pizza. These mounds are made of talc, a substance you can find in baby powder. The Van Dam vent field is an oasis for odd species. One of those is kind of a creepy shrimp without eyes. Instead, they're equipped with patches of light-sensitive cells on their backs. Now, you don't have to travel far away. The next enigma on your list is also in the Caribbean. Just off the coast of Belize, there is a giant sinkhole. It's also blue. Yep, that's the Great Blue Hole. The thing is about 1,000 feet across and more than 400 feet deep. Once, a long time ago, this hole was a cave until rising waters filled it, making it collapse in on itself. The deeper you descend into the Great Hole's crystalline waters, the darker it becomes. You see tons of stalactite-filled caves, but don't even try to enter them unless you want to get hopelessly lost. Once you reach a depth of 50 feet, you notice the water shimmer. That's the invisible line dividing the sinkhole's salty top from the freshwater abyss. Time to get out of there. Who knows what you might come across in the murky depths? Your next destination is off the Pacific Northwest coast. Almost 500 streams of methane bubbles were discovered there several years ago. Because of the bubbles, the vents got the name champagne seeps, which sounds better than the fart spas. Scientists are still puzzling over this phenomenon. Where does the methane come from? Underwater cows? Why is its temperature warmer than that of the surrounding ocean? And most importantly, what would happen if you managed to light a match somewhere near a large bubble? Methane is a highly flammable gas, and setting a methane bubble on fire, well, you get the picture. And now you're off to Iceland. The plan is to dive into Silfra, a fissure filled with pure glacier water. This 206-foot deep crack is the only underwater place on the planet where you can touch two continents at once. The deeper you go, the darker it becomes. The rocky landscape looks otherworldly. Divers who dare to visit this incredible place risk having their gear frozen, getting hypothermia, or not surviving whatsoever. After all, the water temperature in Silfra Fissure is about 35 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. Your next destination is Scotland. Okay, cue the bagpipes. If you dive in the Gulf of Corryvreckan, a narrow strait between two islands, you'll see massive underwater rocks and deep holes. They create the third largest permanent whirlpool on the planet, the Corryvreckan Maelstrom. The water moves through the strait at breakneck speed. It hits the underwater rocks, and the place looks like a pot with boiling water. The waves, created in the process, sometimes reach a height of 15 feet, and you can still hear the roaring whirlpool from 10 miles away. It's believed the Corryvreckan Maelstrom has swallowed dozens of sailors over the centuries. They were caught unaware by the ferocity of this natural phenomenon and pulled underwater in the blink of an eye. Okay, enough bagpipes. Your adventures are getting more and more extreme. You're heading for Antarctica. There, in the Southern Ocean, you'll find the Ross Sea Ice Shelf. Say that 5 times real fast. Later, not now. It's roughly the size of Spain, with the ocean underneath containing as much water as the North Sea. Once, scientists drilled all the way down through this enormous chunk of ice. Imagine their astonishment when they found life in those extreme conditions. The researchers came across dozens of mysterious species not known before. The most unnerving were upside-down swimming fish and overturned sea anemones hanging in the frigid waters. Hopefully, bizarre places with a notorious reputation don't frighten you. Well, too bad, because you're about to visit the Bermuda Triangle. It's an area between Bermuda, Florida, and Puerto Rico where planes and ships seem to vanish in thin air. For the first time, this place attracted a lot of attention in 1945. That's when 5 U.S. Navy planes disappeared during training. Before radio contact was lost, the flight leader said, "We're entering white water. Nothing seems right." After that, the planes with 14 men flying them disappeared. Even scarier, a rescue plane with 13 people on board never came back as well. Some people believe the mythical city of Atlantis lies at the bottom of the triangle. They claim its inhabitants use extraterrestrial technologies to sink ships and crash airplanes. Others blame rare and unexplored natural phenomena, for example magnetic anomalies, or massive pockets of flammable methane gas. There we go again. Then, if a bolt of lightning ignited a giant methane bubble near a ship or a plane, this could probably make it sink without a trace, except the smell. But methane is found everywhere all over the world, and it never behaves this way. Some experts aren't sure there's a mystery to explain whatsoever. Lots of busy routes pass through this area. No wonder more ships and planes sink there than anywhere else. Now, prepare some warm clothes. You're heading for the north again. Your destination is Cape Desolation in Greenland. Nice place. In 2012, Canadian researchers were sampling the water in that area, and their equipment came back to the surface with pieces of coral attached to it. That's how a cold water coral reef was stumbled across. These unique pinkish corals can easily go without sunlight and live in strong currents 3,000 feet below the surface. Another unique spot you can't miss lies between Greenland and Siberia. The Gakkel Ridge is the deepest and most remote portion of the global mid-ocean ridge system. In some places, it reaches the depth of more than 3 miles. It's only natural the darkest corners of this underwater world remain unexplored. Fascinating chemical reactions happening at the bottom of the ridge produce hot fluids rich in minerals. They spew, like freshmen at a rush party, from seafloor vents. And since these vents are isolated from the rest of the ocean, they're hot spots for bizarre creatures found nowhere else in the world. Your next stop is just off the coast of Cuba. Circular columns, paved floors, symmetrical stone structures. That's what the Cuban underwater city looks like. What happened there? Why was a large city abandoned at a depth of more than 2,000 feet? Lots of people believe those are the ruins of a long-forgotten civilization. But scientists have their doubts. They claim the lost city is nothing but a natural phenomenon that appeared about 5 million years ago. The disc and donut structures often appear around the areas of the seafloor where natural gases break free. Again with the gases. When you come to visit the Sargasso Sea in the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean, you won't find its shores. Instead, it's surrounded by powerful ocean currents. These are the same currents that turn the sea into a gigantic convention for dense brown seaweed. In the 19th century, a French ship was discovered in the Sargasso Sea. Its sails were set, but not a single crew member was on board. This mysterious disappearance made people believe the seaweed was carnivorous. The Sargasso Sea is indeed a weird place. It's always eerily calm and unnaturally warm, even though it's surrounded by the churning, freezing waters of the Atlantic Ocean. Could one of these bizarre places become a home to the largest marine predator ever, the megalodon? The giant shark's teeth, some larger than an adult man's hand, have been found pretty much all over the world. But since these creatures preferred warm, shallow waters, they lived along the coastlines of all continents except Antarctica. In other words, it'd be a waste of time to search for the giant predator in the depths of the Mariana Trench, in Greenland, or in Mexican cenotes. But then, could it choose the waters of the Caribbean to hide from the hustle and bustle of the modern world? Don't get your hopes up. There's been no proof the megalodon does exist these days. It wasn't a shy, elusive animal, and still, no one has seen this shark lurking around recently. Not even near the fart spas.
Imagine you're surfing a perfect wave, and then it suddenly freezes. Well, it sure sounds creepy, but couldn't possibly happen in real life, right? Wrong. You can see mind-blowing frozen waves in Antarctica. These waves occur when the ice gets compressed, and the ever-increasing pressure squeezes the air bubbles out. As for the beautiful blue color, it's the result of ice melting and refreezing. When the summer begins, an ordinary-looking river in Colombia transforms into a liquid rainbow. Caño Cristales, also known as the most beautiful river in the world, sparkles in 5 colors: red, black, green, blue, and yellow. It only looks like this for 6 months of the year because the aquatic plant that gives it the bright hues needs the right water level and amount of sunshine to use its magic. Australia is home to a unique horizontal waterfall on the coast of the Kimberley region. It's really just a fast tidal flow moving through 2 narrow-aligned rocks. The tides can rise 30 feet. The falls reverse whenever the tide changes. Also down under is the biggest single rock in the world. It's so big that it even looks like a large hill. It has a circumference of 6 miles and is 1,150 feet high. The edges are eroded since the rock has been around forever. These mud brick buildings are 7 stories high and were built out of fertile soil, hay, and water that were made into bricks and left to bake under the sun for days. The ground floors were used for keeping livestock and grains, and the upper levels were places for socializing and catching good views. Antelope Canyon in Arizona, also known as the place where water runs through rock, has 2 sections of slotted canyons. Throughout the years, the water running through sandstone has created a picturesque formation like no other. If you ever set foot on the arid soil of the Namib Desert in Namibia, prepare yourself for an eerie picture. You'll see countless circular patches between 6 feet to 50 feet in diameter. Organized in a honeycomb-like pattern, they stretch across 1,500 miles toward the horizon. These patches are also known as fairy circles, and you might be disappointed by the explanation of this mystery. No one knows for sure the origin of these circles, even though there are numerous theories, from the radioactivity of the soil to the activity of sand termites. Mount Haleakala in Hawaii is one of the quietest places in the world. National park managers nearly failed to find any sounds to measure here. The place translates from Hawaiian as House of the Sun. It formed thanks to a volcano that got active 1 million years ago. The lava flows built up over the years and grew into a mountain. It has its own climate and weather that's impossible to predict. It takes almost a week by ship from South Africa to travel to the world's most isolated settlement of Edinburgh of the Seven Seas. You'd need special permission from the local government to visit as a tourist. About 300 locals all treat each other as family, grow their own food, and keep their island impeccably clean. Daintree Forest in Australia is the oldest rainforest in the world. It has been around for over 100 million years. Daintree is home to some unique animal species, 12,000 different types of insects, and about half of Australia's frog, butterfly, and bat population. The rainforest also has around 3,000 types of plant species. Rocks that travel are called sailing stones because they seem to move across the dry lake bed of Racetrack Playa in Death Valley National Park, California. As the rocks move, they leave behind a creepy trail that used to have scientists baffled. After all, some of the boulders weigh more than 660 pounds. On top of that, some of the trails are curved, while others are mostly straight, with unexpected turns to the right or the left. But eventually, NASA experts cracked the mystery in 2006. It turns out that in winter, the lake fills with water, covering the boulders at the bottom in ice. And since ice is pretty buoyant, underwater movements and winds make the stones move across the lake bed. In their wake, they leave bizarre tracks, only seen when the water evaporates in the summer. Lake Maracaibo in Venezuela is often called the lightning capital of the world. Thunderstorms arise here 300 days of the year, with a peak in September. Sometimes there are up to 200 flashes in a minute. It happens because cool air coming from the surrounding Andes meets with warm air from the Caribbean Sea and generates electricity. Some places on Earth have less gravity than others. Canada's Hudson Bay, for example, used to be covered by a super thick and heavy glacier during the last ice age. The ice had pushed tons of rock mass outward when it started to melt. The smaller the mass of an object, the less gravity it has. It'll take another 5,000 years for the Earth to get into its original shape in this spot. Until then, you'll always weigh less here than anywhere else in the world. Five Flower Lake in China's Zhoujiago Valley changes its color from amber yellow to emerald green, dark jade to light turquoise, and sometimes coral. It never freezes thanks to underwater hot springs and never melts or dries up, unlike other neighboring lakes. The locals believe it's made up of pieces of a mirror that fell down from the sky. The surrounding valley has some narrow conic karst landforms, spectacular waterfalls, around 140 bird species, and giant panda, along with other endangered plant and animal species. Cape Denison in the Commonwealth Bay in Antarctica is the windiest place on the planet. It has unusual downslope winds. They are formed because of the continent's dome shape and the always cold climate. These winds are so fast and strong, they ruin the measuring instruments and the masts they are attached to. The record speed so far was 200 miles per hour. The Sahara Desert, which takes up 10% of the African continent, is extremely hot and dry. That's why it's one of the top places with the clearest skies. There's hardly ever a cloud above it. This, plus the remoteness from any civilization, makes it one of the best spots for stargazing. In Denmark, people experience blackout-type effects on a pretty regular basis. Just look how weird it is. But it gets even more bizarre when you find out that birds are the cause of this unusual phenomenon. Every spring and fall, millions of starlings begin their annual migration from Sweden, Finland, and Norway toward Britain, Belgium, and France. Denmark is the lucky place where you can observe sort sol, the Danish name for black sun. The birds travel in large flocks, which makes it easier to exchange information and stay warm. Before the birds land, they perform movements that look like dancing, but in fact, they are making different formations in an attempt to shoo predators away. And although the birds fly in highly synchronized patterns, people think that the huge flock changes its shape chaotically. The dark sun lasts only 20 minutes during sunset, and you have to be either fast or lucky to see this phenomenon. The secret of the cotton candy color of Pink Sand Beach in Barbuda is the crushed corals on it and tiny single-celled red organisms living beneath them. You can see that famous shade when the waves are strong enough to wash that mix ashore. The secret of impeccable cleanliness of this place is that it has no public facilities and is less crowded than other Caribbean islands. It took thousands of years to form Piccaninny Ponds in Australia. This whole time, underground freshwater was slowly moving to the surface through limestone. It formed a large underwater cavern with white limestone walls. You'd need a special permit to dive here, and it's definitely worth it. Batara Gorge Waterfall has 3 natural bridges for anyone to walk across, take awesome pictures, and even have picnics. The waterfall is a result of limestone erosion that's been going on for millions of years, even though it looks like someone punched a hole right in the middle. It's located in the village of Tannerine, which is just 2 hours away from the capital Beirut. A village in the Meghalaya state in India is known as the wettest on the planet, according to the Guinness World Records. The average annual rainfall here is about 470 inches. It's a result of warm, moist monsoon winds coming from the Bay of Bengal, bringing clouds full of rain. It flows into rivers and waterfalls and never stops. The locals that work in the fields always wear basket-like covers to protect themselves somehow. The village of Leknes, with a population of about 3,500, is located in Norway, above the Arctic Circle. It has an unusually warm climate compared to other places in the same latitude. In January, the average minimum is 32 degrees Fahrenheit and rarely drops below 30 degrees Fahrenheit. July average temperature is 53 degrees Fahrenheit. That's pretty regular for many places in Europe.
Now, the next time you travel the world on Google Maps, check out this lake in Finland that is shaped just like the country itself. This lake was modified by humans in the north of the country and is an exact model of the country on a 1 to 10,000 scale. In the 1980s, Arctic tourism and skiing above the Arctic Circle was booming. A local company decided to build a hotel and plenty of holiday cabins here. The pond, shaped like Finland, was supposed to bring more tourists to the area. They managed to finish it in just 1 week with 2 excavators, a tape measure, and a few sticks. And I must say, they did a great job. If you don't like long elevators, head to Hanover, Germany. One of the outdoor elevators there only travels for a few inches, and the whole experience takes a few seconds. It has become a real star on social media after some tourists posted footage of it, so you might have to wait in line to enjoy your short ride. In case you're wondering what's the point of this elevator, well, it's installed at the local train station. Every inch counts when you're traveling with heavy luggage or have limited mobility, so it's a good way to navigate within the station. Gummy bear fans, you might want to know that your favorite chewy treat has enough energy in it to start a fire show. If you drop 1 gummy bear into an ignition tube with a small amount of molten potassium or sodium chlorate in it, it will quickly disappear in a ball of fire with an impressive fume cloud. First, potassium chlorate melts. Then the melted potassium chlorate breaks down and releases oxygen. The sugar in the gummy bear burns quickly, turning into carbon dioxide and water, which gives off a lot of energy. After everything cools down, you can look at what's left. The black stuff is unburned carbon, the white solid is potassium chloride, and the caramel-looking stuff is partially burned sugar. So we only have 6 muscles in our outer ear, and cats have an impressive 32. That's why they can rotate their ears 180 degrees and use them to show their current mood. If you see the ears are upright and facing forward, you have one happy cat. If the ears are rotated to the sides, sort of like airplane wings, or angled backward, your kitty must be really stressed or afraid of something. Ears held low or rotated to the sides could be a sign the cat is sick, so watch out for those. A stray dog in Brazil got a job as a professional car consultant at a local Hyundai dealership. The company manager noticed a stray pup next to the dealership and started leaving food and water for his new friend. Other staff members also fell in love with the pup and finally decided to adopt him. The doggy got a home, a job, and the name Tucson, after Hyundai's popular compact SUV. Tucson's job includes wearing a tie, getting behind the wheel, and winning over the hearts of customers. You can see from the company's social media that he excels at all these tasks. In Mexico, they like to spice up mango and citrus fruits with salt and chili pepper. You can try mango with a shrimp taste in the Philippines and salted watermelon in the southern states. When you're eating a sweet fruit sprinkled with salt, you'll notice the salty flavor with the first bite, and the sweet fruity taste follows a bit later. And when you get used to it, it feels as juicy and amazing as ever. It's most likely because salt affects the sweet taste receptor for sugar, and then the real magic happens on a molecular level. You can try and put salt on any fruit you like, but the effect will be different. Salt can make sweeter fruits like cherries and strawberries even sweeter and balance the flavor of grapefruit, pineapple, and watermelon. Now, back in 1956, long before the first dating apps were a thing, or apps in general, A Swedish sailor named Ake Viking decided to ask the sea for help to find a soulmate. He put a short message to someone beautiful and far away in a bottle and let it travel the world. 2 years later, he received a reply from a girl named Paulina from Sicily. She wrote that she wasn't really beautiful, but she thought it was super cool that the bottle had covered such a huge distance. That's why she decided to let the sender know she had found it. Well, they became pen pals, and after a while, you guessed it, Viking moved to Sicily to marry his one and only Paulina. That unique pattern on your fingertips stays with you for your entire life. If you happen to damage your fingerprints somehow, or develop some skin condition that can change them, they'll still grow back within a month. As you grow older, the skin on your fingertips becomes less elastic and the ridges get thicker, but the pattern still doesn't change. It just becomes harder to scan. If you work as a bricklayer, though, or have to handle certain chemicals, you might lose some details in your beautiful natural pattern. But no worries, once you stop doing those activities, you'll get your fingertips back. Unless maybe you're a meat cutter. If you still believe in the 5-second rule, there's some bad news for you. When your food hits the floor, it instantly becomes a bacteria magnet. Researchers discovered that moisture, surface type, and contact time all play a role in how badly contaminated your food will get. Food with high moisture levels, like juicy watermelon, are more likely to get in trouble fast. In a different study, researchers swabbed the floors around the University of Illinois in a lab, hall, dormitory, and cafeteria to see how many organisms they could find. Even on dry, sterile surfaces, germs relocated onto cookies and gummy bears in less than 5 seconds. For some foods, it took less than 1 second for the transfer to begin. The first Barbie doll was made in 1959, but her great-great-great-grandmother comes from ancient Rome. Archaeologists found some incredible sarcophagi during construction work in Rome in the 19th century. One of those had a 9-inch-long doll next to its owner. The head and body were made from a single piece of ivory. Its arms and legs were separate and connected with a clever nail mechanism, allowing them to move. Its face was so detailed that it looked like a tiny portrait. The doll even wore a tiny gold ring with a key on its finger and had a small ivory box full of jewels, tiny mirrors, bone combs, and the remnants of accessories. But Ken was nowhere to be found. In case you're looking for a new job and you love to cuddle, there might be an opening for you. As weird as it sounds, a professional snuggler is a real job. There are several companies that provide cuddling services and look for staff members who are ready to give hugs and snuggles and listen and support people who really need it. Now, anyone can give hugs to others, but you need to be trained in professional cuddling to make money out of it. You will need to learn to set boundaries with your future clients without hurting their feelings and to mentally care for others without giving away too much of your own personality. Famous scientist Nikola Tesla knew that the whole world would go wireless back in 1900. He mentioned that devices no larger than a watch would be able to transfer signals precisely. Back then, it was a revolutionary idea the scientist got while conducting experiments at one of his labs. Tesla was so confident about the success of his idea that he even convinced famous banker J.P. Morgan to invest money in his project. The World Wireless System involved a tower shaped like a mushroom on the shores of Long Island. It was supposed to transmit messages, phone calls, and images to ships across the Atlantic Ocean. Sadly, because of financial issues, the tower was never finished. Oh well, it all turned out now, didn't it? Octopuses have 3 hearts. 2 of them pump blood to the gills, while the bigger heart circulates blood to the rest of their body. They also have 9 brains. There's the large central one, but also each of their 8 arms has a mini brain of its own, which is why they can act independently. Since each arm has its own brain, the central brain only needs to send a higher level signal to the arm. Things like, move to that nearby crevice, there might be a crab hiding inside. In the case of humans, the brain would guide and take control of each movement of our legs and arms. And with an octopus, arms act almost independently on their way to the crevice. It also tastes and feels with the suction cups on it. Since their arms are so independent, an octopus doesn't actually know where they are unless it sees them. The human body has an ability called proprioception. Thanks to it, we know where our arm is, even if we hold it, let's say, behind our back. 1816 is known as the year when summer didn't come. In April 1815, there was a massive explosion on Mount Tambora in Indonesia. It sent enormous clouds of volcanic ash up into the atmosphere. The majority of the northern hemisphere got covered with a shroud of dust and dirt and kind of refused to settle. In June of the following year, the cold winter didn't just come to an end. Frost damaged crops and snow and rain persisted during the whole summer. In Iceland, you'll find some of the most breathtaking sceneries on our planet. Jagged mountains, fjords, hot geysers, ice fields carved into the landscape. Stunning yet intriguingly black sand beaches, such as Reynisfjara Beach. Most of the sand on beaches is generally formed from rocks that have broken down because of weather changes and erosion through thousands or even millions of years. And on Reynisfjara, the sand is a striking black color, and that's because of volcanic activity. Lava came out of an erupting volcano, got to the surface, cooled, and then hardened in the Atlantic Ocean, creating such a fascinating black hue. This beach is so magically stunning, but it's also very dangerous because of its sneakier waves. That's when a few smaller waves join together into a single, really big one. This phenomenon can happen when ocean currents force waves together, or in the case of Reynisfjara, when such waves come from an offshore underground cliff and get an even stronger pulling effect. Considering the ocean's low temperatures too, it's definitely better to just take pictures from a safe spot. Some trees talk to each other. Not the way we do, of course, but, for example, acacia trees that grow over the African savanna can warn each other if there's something dangerous coming. When some animals, such as antelopes, gobble up its leaves, the tree immediately starts producing more tannin, which is toxic to animals. They also emit a special type of gas that travels through the air and warns other trees they should protect themselves too. You're stargazing, such a chill night, and then a flash of bright light streaks through the night sky. A shooting star, so cool. But what we see is not actually a star, although we call it that way. They're meteors, which are basically small chunks of dust and rock moving through space. As they're passing through our atmosphere, they cause something called friction when one thing rubs against another, and that's why they glow. Also, the friction causes heat. Dust and rocks get extremely hot as they fly through the atmosphere, and the heat makes them glow until the moment they burn out and turn into what we call the shooting star. Sunsets in deserts are extremely beautiful because of the spectacular colors they produce a bit more than elsewhere. Sunlight consists of various shades of the color spectrum. When the sun is high in the sky, these colors mix together and our eyes see them as white. But as the sun gets lower, its rays have to go through a thicker layer of atmosphere before they get to us. The atmosphere then scatters shorter wavelengths of light, like blue and purple, before we can even see them. That's why the longer orange and red wavelengths stand out. In urban environments, air pollution can make sunset colors duller than everywhere. The clean air in deserts allow the vivid colors coming from the sun to shine through at twilight. Also, the moisture, water vapor, and rain-engorged clouds can mute the sunset's hues. Since there's no rain, clouds are thin and wispy, so they filter and reflect sunlight instead of blocking it. Bamboo grows really fast. It's actually the fastest growing plant on Earth, sometimes growing about 3 feet in just one day. You can find it in dense forests, where only a little light gets to the ground, which means bamboo is under strong pressure to reach the sunlight as quickly as it can. There's an underground stem that connects bamboo shoots to their parent plant, so the shoot doesn't really need leaves of its own until it gets to its full height. Also, bamboo grows faster than other plants because it doesn't waste its time and energy on growing rings that thicken the stalk. It's just a thin, hollow stick that grows straight up. You'll notice some of the big trees have shallow root systems, sometimes even 10 inches deep in the ground. The roots generally need access to oxygen and water, and they can mostly find it in special underground pockets called soil pores. When a tree has ideal moisture and soil conditions, it can send roots deeper down under the surface and get what it needs. But most of the time, conditions are not perfect, considering bedrock, stones, and compact soil that physically prevents the roots from going down. Such obstacles also prevent the roots from getting the needed oxygen. So, when life gets tough, the tree will take an easier option. Its roots will stay close to the surface and spread out in different directions. Drought conditions are another reason trees can have shallow root systems. By staying closer to the surface, they can take most of the rainfall collection. Plants are exposed to the sunlight most of the time, but they still don't get sunburn. They appeared on land about 700 million years ago, and one of the key things they needed to survive was something that would protect them against the ultraviolet rays coming from the sun. Those in the sea had seawater as protection. UV radiation is mostly responsible for sunburn, so land plants developed a special protein that detects it. This protein sends signals to the cells to protect the plant from the damage and effects of UV radiation. Basically, it's like they produce their own natural sunscreen, but this still doesn't mean they're 100% protected. You know that common belief that if you water plants in the midday sunshine, this can cause their sunburn? Some think droplets of water act as tiny lenses and then focus the sunlight onto the leaf surface. But they're not strong enough to actually focus sunlight from a water droplet onto the surface of a leaf. It's just that their natural sunscreen doesn't mean total protection. Too much exposure to UV radiation damages cells in the leaves and bark of the majority of plants. Earth's core is as hot as the surface of the sun. You'd think it could easily melt our entire planet, especially since the core is only 1,800 miles away from the surface. If the sun were so close, we'd be like French fries. But we're alive because the center of the sun is surrounded by a mantle of rock that's mostly solid. The crust we walk on actually floats on that mantle and protects us. If the sun was close, we'd only have empty space to protect us, and you and I wouldn't be talking. Also, to melt the entire planet, you'd need way more energy than the heat in its core. So there.
We are up for a crazy Atlantic hurricane season. It may be even worse than that of 2005, the year that brought us Hurricane Katrina. That one took 1,392 lives and cost the country over $100 billion. Experts predict there will be between 17 to 25 total named storms. Some of these storms are about to become hurricanes, with winds reaching over 100 miles per hour or higher. We're already seeing storms sweep across the country, bringing dangers like tornadoes, flooding, and hail. You gotta thank the El Niño Southern Oscillation, or ENSO, for this. This complicated term has to do with El Niño and La Niña, the two giant forces that basically shape our world. Normally, winds in the Pacific Ocean blow west along the equator, moving warm water from South America towards Asia. This warm water is replaced by cold water rising from the depths of the Pacific. But during El Niño and La Niña, this usual pattern is messed up. El Niño is the warm phase of the ENSO cycle. During El Niño, the equatorial winds weaken, causing warm water to shift back towards the west coast of the Americas. This means less cold water rises to the surface. The weather in northern parts of the US and Canada become drier and warmer because of it. But there are wetter conditions in southern states. In the Atlantic, El Niño weakens hurricane seasons, and it ramps up hurricane activity in the central and eastern Pacific. In Africa, it brings more rain to East Africa but less to Southern Africa, West Africa, and parts of the Sahara. La Niña is the cold phase of the ENSO cycle. During this phase, the westward winds along the equator in the Pacific are stronger than usual, and they push more warm water towards Asia. And because of it, colder, nutrient-rich water rises to the surface along the Americas' west coast. These colder Pacific waters push the jet stream northward, giving us drier weather in the southern US, but wetter and colder conditions in the Pacific Northwest and Canada. La Niña also brings warmer winters to the southern US and cooler than normal temperatures to the north. La Niña usually calms hurricane activity in the Pacific, but intensifies it in the Atlantic. In 2023, El Niño was in charge, and it took most storms up before they got to the US. But this year, we've switched to La Niña, and this lady brings us colder water in the Pacific and a pattern that lets storms move a little farther west and reach the Caribbean. And when they get there, they can easily move into the Gulf and affect Florida and other states. The upcoming intense Atlantic hurricane season also has to do with a strong monsoon season in West Africa. It creates moisture and waves off Africa's coast and can travel along the Atlantic and spur hurricanes. The Atlantic hurricane season runs from the 1st of June to the 30th of November, and most activity happens between mid-August and mid-October. Since the 1950s, tropical cyclones have been given names to make it easier for meteorologists to inform the public about them. You're more likely to remember that Leslie is coming than Hurricane X34D is on the way, right? So there are 20 names on the alphabetical list this year, from Alberto to Beryl to Valerie and William. Let's hope it won't get as terrible as the Galveston hurricane. The most fatal natural disaster in U.S. history hit Texas in the year 1900. A Category 4 hurricane smashed into Galveston, demolishing over 3,600 buildings with winds over 135 miles per hour. It took the lives of between 6,000 and 12,000 people. One of the reasons it became so fatal was poor communication policy. Days before the disaster, it was clear to a professional weather forecaster that the storm was moving west. But the Weather Bureau in Washington predicted it would go over Florida and up to New England, which was way off. The Bureau was just 10 years old then, so hurricane science in the US wasn't very advanced. Cuban scientists were excellent at tracking storms because their region is so prone to them. So they knew it was heading towards the Gulf of Mexico. Unfortunately, the director of the Weather Bureau was so jealous that the Cuban forecasters were better than the American ones that he cut off the flow of information from Cuba and made it difficult for local forecasters to issue warnings without going through Washington. In the days before the storm hit, the chief observer in Galveston began to suspect that Washington's forecast was wrong and tried to warn the city, but it was too late. The hurricane left Galveston in ruins. After this hurricane, the Weather Bureau started improving communication, both internationally and within the U.S. The officials in charge are doing everything possible to improve forecasts, support the people, and help the affected areas recover more easily after the hurricanes hit. They're going to try new forecast models to predict tropical cyclones getting stronger, help emergency and water managers prepare for potential flooding, and protect people and infrastructure. Coastal weather buoys in the tropical western Atlantic and Caribbean have been upgraded, and new drifters and sail drones, underwater gliders, and a lightweight drop sonde will provide real-time data. There are also some things you can do to ensure your safety before, during, and after a hurricane. If you live in a hurricane-prone area, Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas, you must always be prepared before the high storm season. Make up a family disaster plan that will outline your actions during an emergency. Map out several evacuation routes in case your primary one is blocked, and decide on a meeting place if you get separated. You can arrange drills to teach family members how to shut off water, gas, and electricity, and even make sure the youngest knows how to call emergency services. Pack a disaster kit that will be ready to go at a moment's notice. It should include essentials like food, water, a first aid kit, and flashlights to last at least 72 hours on your own. You can buy a generator to make sure you have electricity in case of a power outage until the power returns. Keep it in a secure place, away from rain and rising water, with proper ventilation. You're also going to need self-powered radios and flashlights. If you can, add a safe room to your house that's strengthened to withstand high winds with reinforced concrete ceiling, floor, and walls. Make sure you have enough canned and non-perishable food and bottled water for at least 3 days. When the storm is about to hit, head north to get away from it, where it will be much weaker by the time it gets there. It's much safer to keep your family and pets together away from the storm than trying to ride it out at home. Try to go in one car if possible. Always follow local evacuation orders, especially if you're in a mobile home. Fill up your gas tank and give yourself plenty of time to get out. Never leave your pets behind. Debris, floodwaters, or flying objects can be dangerous for them. If you're staying put during a storm, you need a safe spot for you, your family, and your pets. This place shouldn't have any windows or skylights. If you're hiding at home, close all interior doors and secure the exterior ones. Quickly find an interior room with strong walls and no windows, like a bathroom or closet. If your home isn't safe, look for a community shelter. Get to your shelter at least 2 hours before the storm hits so it doesn't catch you outside. Bring a battery-powered radio with extra batteries for updates every 15 to 30 minutes. Never leave your shelter even if it seems calm, as conditions can get worse quickly, especially if you're in the eye of the storm. For extra protection, lie on the floor under something sturdy like a table. Don't use electric appliances, phones, or showers during the storm. Don't leave your shelter until you get the official all clear from the authorities. Be careful. There will be many hazards outside. A ship is traveling across the Atlantic Ocean when a storm starts. At first, the situation doesn't seem to be very bad, but soon, people on board the ship realize that the storm is intensifying. Waves are huge, and nothing can save the ship. It's starting to sink. On board, there's only one lifeboat. Sadly, it can only hold one person. The captain is in a terrible situation. He needs to decide which passenger can be given a chance to survive. Besides the captain, there are 8 people on board. Some of them seem to be lovely, others look like villains. But you might not know the truth until it's too late. The first passenger is Alex, a 28-year-old talented artist. He's just had his first international exhibition and is boasting about that left and right. He claims to dream of inspiring the world with his art, but did I mention it's his shy twin brother who painted those masterpieces? And Alex just steals his shine? Next is 23-year-old Maria, who's 8 months pregnant. She's quite spoiled, often behaves unreasonably, and treats the staff on board badly. She's traveling home to her husband, but little does he know that the kid is not his, but his best friend's. And she's been cheating on him since forever. Though we can't let this innocent soul perish, can we? Despite his untidy appearance, this 65-year-old scientist, Professor Marcus, is a leading researcher in the field of gene therapy. He's working on a breakthrough that could save millions of lives, but there are skeletons in his closet too. It's been 15 years since anyone saw his wife, Judith. Does Marcus's scientific progress have something to do with the mysterious disappearance of his wife? Dr. Anna is 34 years old. She's a surgeon who's saved hundreds of lives during natural disasters. She succeeded as a doctor, but failed as a parent. Her 3 daughters live with their dad and don't want to hear anything about their mother. 78-year-old Teresa is a widow whose family gave up on her because of her bad temper. She's traveling for the last time in her life to visit her late husband's grave. A little boy, Mark, is just 7 years old, but his unruly character has caused a lot of arguments between the other passengers. He's traveling alone since his parents are supposed to meet him on the shore. This brat's parents are too busy working, so he gets more and more uncontrollable. Who knows what he'll be capable of doing in 10 years or so? A robot android, Alpha 3, is also on board the ship. It has an artificial intelligence created to assist in expeditions. It can also control the ship in emergency cases. And the last passenger is Emily. This beautiful and charming woman is 30 years old. She lives off of powerful, old, rich men and has enough money to burn. She hasn't worked a single day in her entire life and just travels the world. To make his choice, the captain invites each of the passengers to listen to their stories. He asks each of them just one question. Why would you be the one to survive? Alex says, "You see, my art can inspire and change the world. Looking at my works, they help people see the beauty of life, especially during difficult times. I must continue living. I have so much to show through my paintings." Maria answers, Can't you see that a new life is growing inside my body? It's me and my unborn kid who must survive. We risk losing a talented doctor or an artist in the future. It's not just my life we're talking about. Professor Marcus says, "My work is not finished yet. It might save thousands of lives. I'm close to a breakthrough and I need to live to make it." Dr. Anna says, "My hands save lives. I have proven many times that I can do the impossible in extreme conditions. The world can't lose my skills and knowledge." The elderly woman begs,
Please, you must understand me. I might have lived a long life, but I want to see my husband's grave.
Mark says,
I'm still a kid. My parents are waiting for me at home. I want to hug my mom and dad.
Alpha 3 states that it was created to serve and help people. Its ability to analyze situations and make rational decisions in a crisis can be used to prevent future disasters. Emily admits,
Look at me. Doesn't every person have their unique value? I'm young and beautiful, and I have a lot of potential. Surely you see it.
the captain is desperate. How can he, a mere mortal, decide who should live and who he should take this chance away from? After pacing his cabin and hitting the walls with his fists, he decides to, estimate passengers' value and see how useful they are. Alex, as a talented artist, can influence society through his art, providing inspiration for thousands of people who will see his masterpieces. But no one knows where his ego can bring him. Plus, remember who the real artist is. Saving Maria means saving her unborn child. But however cynical it may sound, the contribution of these two lives to the future of society is assumed, but not guaranteed. What if that child grows up to become a criminal? Professor Marcus can indeed provide significant benefits to society through his scientific research, but he isn't young. What if he doesn't live long enough to finish his work? Dr. Anna is a surgeon. She's already saved a lot of lives and will definitely continue to do so in the future. Her ability to provide immediate medical assistance in critical situations makes her one of the most valuable candidates for survival, since she can directly and regularly save lives. At the same time, she is a terrible mother, and it'll definitely influence the lives of her daughters. Teresa is living history and experience, but unfortunately, her ability to continue contributing to society is limited. In simple words, she's old, and we don't know how much time she has left. Mark is in a similar situation. He has the potential for a long and productive life, but his immediate contribution to society is limited. His survival is based on the potential for future contribution, which is difficult to estimate at the moment. Alpha 3 can provide valuable technical assistance and functional support, but as a robot, it does not add to human well-being directly. As for Emily, despite her beauty, her achievements are minimal. On the other hand, she's only dating wealthy and influential people, and thus has a lot of influence on society of her own. Now, from the perspective of how much profit each of the passengers can bring, saving Dr. Anna seems to be one of the most logical choices. Her knowledge and skills can save many lives in the future, which means the greatest good for the greatest number. But let's have a look at the captain's choice. In the end, after listening to all the passengers and pressed for time, the man decides to save Emily. Can you figure out why he's made such an unexpected choice? Write your answer in the comments below. You can also pause the video to think it over. Okay, I suppose you're ready for the answer to be revealed. You see, even though each passenger presented very compelling arguments for why they should be saved, the captain was particularly moved by Emily's charm and attractiveness. And even though there were more logical candidates in terms of utilitarianism and humanism, the captain succumbed to his personal feelings and preferences, which influenced his decision. This riddle illustrates that in real life, people often make choices based on their sympathies and preferences rather than logic or public benefit. This is because emotions and personal relationships can have a strong influence on our perception of situations and decision-making. Here's a real-life example. HR managers tend to choose candidates they like or share common interests with, and it doesn't matter that other candidates might have more suitable skills or experience. This phenomenon is known as the similarity effect. Now, I've got an important question for you. Which passenger would you save? Share your choice in the comments. But I'd like to remind you that there is no correct answer.
The strongest earthquake ever to strike east of the Mississippi River that happened over 200 years ago was never over, according to some scientists. Most earthquakes last seconds to minutes, and the official record breaker so far is a silent one in Sumatra that was going on for 32 years. This slow slip event triggered a massive quake and a tsunami. So if it's true that the New Madrid earthquake is still sending aftershocks, we'll have a new top name for this sad list. The earthquake started in December of 1811 with a powerful quake in a sparsely populated part of northeast Arkansas. They felt the shaking almost 1,000 miles away in the White House, and the tower bells were ringing in Boston, even further away. It even made the mighty Mississippi flow backward for a few minutes over new waterfalls formed by shifted ground. The town of New Madrid, Missouri, completely disappeared in the disaster. The Earth wouldn't stay still until the end of January the following year, when things got serious again. A massive quake hit, this time near the junction of the Ohio and Mississippi rivers, right in the Missouri boot heel. Geologists believe it was a rupture on the New Madrid Fault, putting even more strain on the nearby Reelfoot Fault. Just when people thought it couldn't get worse, another 2 weeks of trembling passed, and the Reelfoot Fault snapped deep beneath New Madrid. Down in Tennessee, about 15 miles south of New Madrid, the ground uplift created Reelfoot Lake. Steamboats were chugging along the river, with thousands of trees floating and acres of woods torn apart by the quake. In St. Louis, Missouri, which is 160 miles away, buildings were badly damaged, and chimneys fell in Cincinnati, Ohio, 400 miles away. People all the way in Montreal, Canada, over 1,000 miles away, felt the earthshake. Seismologists have registered about 200 small earthquakes in the New Madrid seismic zone every year since 1974. Some researchers believe that up to 30% of those were aftershocks from those big quakes back in 1811 and 1812. In parts of the U.S. where there's not much tectonic action going on, these aftershocks could keep rumbling for years, maybe even centuries, after the big ones hit. Aftershocks are the Earth's way of releasing all that built-up stress from the main quake. When the ground shakes from the first earthquake, it puts a lot of pressure on the rocks nearby. And when those rocks can't take it anymore, they crack, causing even more shaking. That's the aftershock. And they can be pretty intense, especially right after the main quake, but weaken over time. Not all scientists agree that contemporary earthquakes have to do with those from 200 years ago. We mostly associate faults with those lines where Earth's plates meet. But there's a whole network of those right under the center of the North American plate. They're like relics from 750 million years ago, when North America was part of a supercontinent called Rodinia. When Rodinia started to break up, it left behind these rifts, weak spots in the Earth's crust that run deep beneath the modern Midwest. It could explain the earthquake action. An international team of geologists decided to take a fresh look at 3 major earthquakes that shook North America and end the debate. They used a new math method called the nearest neighbor. It says that if earthquakes are too close in space, time, and magnitude to be independent background events, then one is assumed to have triggered the other. Depending on how you look at the numbers, somewhere between 10 to 65% of the recent quakes in the region could be aftershocks of those historic earthquakes. And a huge quake that hit Charleston, South Carolina at the end of the 19th century might explain up to 72% of the earthquakes in the area since then. But not all places are the same, so the scientific debate continues. In 1774, British explorer James Cook noticed a glow in the distance. It was the volcano of Mount Yasur in Vanuatu. This bad boy had been spewing lava and ash ever since, and it's quite likely that it's been doing that for way longer. The volcano has been sitting at alert level since October 2016, which means things are really unsettled around there. They've even marked off a 2,000-foot radius around the crater to keep people safe. There have been low to moderate outbursts, shooting out ash, gas, and steam, and some bigger blasts throwing stuff outside the crater. Satellite images have picked up on some hotspots of sulfur dioxide plumes, showing that Yasur is still cooking up a big storm down there. Stromboli, one of the volcanic islands near Sicily, officially has the Guinness World Record as the longest continuously erupting volcano. It has been putting on a fiery show for over 2,400 years straight. Ancient sailors nicknamed it the Lighthouse of the Mediterranean. Most of the time, Stromboli's just spitting out spatter, but every now and then it throws in some lava flows or shoots up some moderately high fountains. Sometimes you might even catch a glimpse of steam-driven outbursts. Over 200 million years ago, the world went through a major makeover, with not one, not two, but 4 massive volcanic eruptions changing the game. It all happened in Rensselaer, a large chunk of island that used to be a supermassive volcano stretching across what's now British Columbia and Alaska. This volcanic activity might have helped dinosaurs grow from cat-sized critters into giants we saw in Jurassic Park. It kicked off a 2-million-year rainy season. It made the whole world hot and humid, and the dinos just loved it. Researchers dug deep into sediment layers beneath an ancient lake in China to uncover these secrets. They found traces of volcanic ash and mercury, clear signs of those epic eruptions. There were carbon signatures showing huge spikes in carbon dioxide levels, making the atmosphere toasty and the rain pouring down. It all happened in 4 separate pulses, each triggered by those monstrous volcanic blasts. There's a spot in a national park not too far away from Sydney, Australia, where a fire has been raging deep underground for at least 6,000 years. They call it Burning Mountain, and it's a coal seam fire, burning its way through a layer of coal beneath the Earth's surface. Once these underground fires start, they're pretty much impossible to put out. This ball of fire is up to 30 feet wide and extremely hot, but there's no flame, it's smoldering. The fire has been creeping along at a pace of about 3 feet per year. A local farmer first spotted it in the 19th century and thought it was a volcano. The people who have lived here for ages believe this place is sacred. They've used it for cooking and crafting tools, and tell that it started from a widow's tears or the torch of a hero. But experts think it could have been a lightning strike or coal heating up like a summer barbecue from the interaction with oxygen. Some say it might have been burning since before the dinosaurs roamed the Earth. No one knows exactly how long this mountain will burn or in what direction it'll move. Right now, the coal has enough oxygen to burn for centuries or even millennia without human intervention. The fire is heating up the mountain like a giant oven, making it crack and crumble, inviting in more oxygen to feed on. Even if humans decide to take action, these coal seam fires need truckloads of water and liquid nitrogen to tame them. Several years ago, explorers noticed that the smolder was creeping close to a cliff overlooking a little river. And depending on what the coal seam decides to do next, we could see some dramatic changes here in the coming decades. There could be flames with much more heat, or the coal seam could go deep, extinguish itself, and smolder out.
One interesting thing that happens in map design is the so-called Baltimore phenomenon, or Baltimore effect. This phenomenon happens when a city or another object is left off a map because there's just not enough space, while smaller cities make the cut simply because there's room for them. The name comes from Baltimore, Maryland, which often gets left out of maps because it's surrounded by bigger cities like Washington, D.C. But on the flip side, sometimes smaller and less well-known cities like Alice Springs in Australia end up on the same map simply because there's enough space for them. Like at this scale, Alice Springs, which give or take 25,000 inhabitants, is labeled. But the huge city of Guangzhou, with over 14 million people, is somehow not. This phenomenon is more common on automated mapping sites, but it doesn't happen at every zoom level. On popular sites like Google Maps and other similar ones, you'll only start seeing Baltimore show up at certain zoom levels, like the 5th, 6th, or 7th zoom. Cartographers can tweak their maps to make sure they're useful and convey spatial information effectively, finding the right balance between showing important details and keeping the map clear and focused. The best maps are the ones that show key elements clearly, while still accurately representing the world. But Alice Springs is not the only weird thing on the map of Australia. Look at the time zone map. This 10.5 section looks a bit off, huh? Well, Australia is officially divided into 3 standard time zones: Western, Central, and Eastern. Australian Central Time aligns with UTC plus 9:30, with individual states and territories deciding whether to observe daylight savings time. Australian island territories and Antarctic stations contribute to the complexity of the time zones. Despite this, Australian time zones are generally easy to understand. In addition to the official time zones, there is an unofficial hybrid time zone called Australian Central Western Standard Time. This time zone is halfway between Western Time, UTC plus 8, and Central Time, UTC plus 9:30, making it UTC plus 8:45, a unique quarter-hour difference. Australian Central Western Standard Time is only observed in a small area in far southeastern Western Australia, along the Eyre Highway. The Australian Central Western Standard Time area includes settlements such as Cocklebiddy, Madura, Mundrabilla, Eucla, and Border Village. Only a few hundred people live in this region, making it easier for them to agree on a non-standard time zone. Despite the lack of official approval, Australian Central Western Standard Time continues to be followed due to the significant time gap between Western and Central time zones, especially during the summer when South Australia observes daylight saving time and Western Australia does not. The use of this unique time zone can often lead to confusion, even amongst the locals. Eucla Police, for example, operate on Perth's time zone, causing occasional tardiness to events such as community gatherings. Locals mentioned that in the past, Eucla operated on its own unofficial time, which made things simpler, before the transition to align with Perth time. They also face confusion as their location in South Australia does not observe daylight savings. The history of the Australian Central Western Standard Time dates back to the establishment of a telegraph station in Eucla in 1877. Although the exact origins of this time zone are unclear, it is speculated that it was adopted to avoid confusion at the telegraph station located on the border between Western Australia and South Australia. UTC plus 9:45 was historically utilized in Australia as a time zone known as Central Western Daylight Time. Certain roadhouses along the Eyre Highway in South Australia and Western Australia adopted UTC plus 9:45 during the summer months when South Australia observed daylight savings time. While not officially recognized by the authorities, the boundaries of this time zone are clearly outlined and often depicted on local road maps. 5 locations in Australia, including Border Village, Kaiguna, Eucla, Madura, and Mundrabilla, previously observed UTC plus 9:45. Currently, these areas operate on UTC plus 8:45 due to Western Australia's lack of daylight savings time. Australia is not the only example of weird time zones. China has a population of approximately 1.5 billion people, and it's the 3rd largest country in the world. Despite its vast size, China operates on a single time zone known as Beijing Time or China Standard Time. This unique time zone covers almost 5 geographical time zones within the country. At times, in some cities in China, the sun rises as late as 10 a.m. People often have lunch after 2 p.m., or even after 4 p.m. if they're not in a hurry. Since 1991, daylight savings time has not been observed in China. However, the region of Xinjiang, located in the western part of the country, follows Xinjiang time, which is 2 hours behind China Standard Time, and is considered an unofficial time zone. Nepal also has its unique time zone, as it operates on Nepal time all year round, without the use of daylight savings time. It's a bit unique compared to other countries because it has a UTC offset of plus 545, meaning that Nepali clocks are 5 hours and 45 minutes ahead of Coordinated Universal Time. This is only a 15-minute difference from neighboring India, where the standard time used to be the same until Nepal decided to set its own time zone in 1956. Now, let's examine the map of Europe. Great Britain, Portugal, and Spain are all located at roughly the same latitude. However, despite this, it's 1 hour earlier in Portugal and the UK compared to Spain. Why is this the case? In the 1940s, Spain was instructed to switch to German time, a directive that was accepted by Spanish authorities. Over time, despite changes in leadership, Spain remained in the same time zone, resulting in it being 1 hour behind its neighboring countries at the same latitude. But like many other countries, Spain sticks to daylight savings time. Greenland would rank as the world's 12th largest country if it were independent, but it's currently part of Denmark. The country has 3 different time zones. Most of it is 3 hours behind Greenwich Mean Time, except for only one town on the eastern coast, which is 2 hours ahead. Thule Air Base in the northwest operates on GMT-4, while the tiny population of Danmarkshavn sticks to GMT. Daylight savings time was implemented to give us more daylight during the evenings after work, which could help save energy by lowering the need for lights and heat. It was first suggested by Benjamin Franklin in 1784 to align waking hours with daylight and conserve energy, and was implemented in Port Arthur, Ontario in 1906. Since then, many countries have adopted the practice, though some regions near the equator or at high latitudes opt out due to minimal variations in daylight hours. In the United States, daylight savings time is observed almost everywhere, except in Hawaii and Arizona. Arizona's scorching hot weather makes daylight saving time kind of pointless. People there would rather get stuff done in the cool morning hours than sweat it out in the evenings. However, the Navajo Nation, which is autonomous Native American territory, sticks to the same daylight savings time schedule as the rest of the country. Even though it spans 3 states, Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah, they keep the time consistent across their lands. As for Hawaii, due to its tropical location, the amount of sunlight doesn't change much throughout the year. If Hawaii changed its time zone to UTC-9 during daylight savings time, the sun would rise at around 7 a.m. in June. This is because most of the islands are situated towards the west of the Hawaii-Aleutian time zone, and theoretically should be in the next time zone to the west. In the past, Hawaiian Standard Time was based on a different longitude than it is now. Life originated in water, or so we always heard. In reality, it could have begun in ice. We know that it all started more than 3 billion years ago with simple microbes, and it's been evolving ever since. However, there are many theories about how exactly it happened. Maybe not heat, but cold was the beginning of everything. Cells were the first tiny life forms. But before we had fully developed cells, there were simpler things that couldn't survive on their own. Certain important chemicals for life, like the mentioned amino acids, usually float in water in tiny amounts. First, they needed something to help them stay together without spreading all over the place. Otherwise, they would have gotten lost in the sea. And second, they needed to stick together in groups to form more complex things. Moreover, when they started to form in groups, they started the process of evolution. They chose the best molecules to do specific tasks and kicked out the faulty ones. Without this organization, the fastest replicators, or parasites, would have taken over. There were several ways they could organize themselves. 3 billion years ago, oceans were covered in ice. And it turned out that certain important chemicals for life, such as amino acids and nucleic acids, are more stable in colder temperatures. When water freezes, these chemicals that hang out in the oceans get packed together, making it easier for life to form. Or maybe what helped them were special spots called hydrothermal vents. Imagine the deepest, darkest parts of the ocean floor, where hot water shoots out from cracks in the Earth's crust. Life might have started right there, in these extreme conditions. These vents spew out important elements like carbon and hydrogen, which are crucial for life. As the superheated water travels through the Earth's crust, it picks up other important stuff like minerals. When it finally bursts out of the vents, it creates a kind of soup rich in chemicals. In the rocky crevices around these vents, all these molecules could have come together and sparked the first signs of life. The hot, mineral-rich environment acted like a kitchen to cook the first recipes ever for living things. Even today, these vents are home to vibrant ecosystems, showing that life can thrive in extreme conditions. Ancient stories also talk about life starting from clay. It turns out that this idea has a scientific basis too. Imagine tiny particles of clay, like little grains of sand, sticking together in a structured way. As they grow and get bigger, they keep their original shape intact. They form bigger areas and clumps. They become kind of like patches, clay clumps with tiny holes inside. Each patch may be exposed to different things in the environment, like different chemicals or substances. When these outside molecules go through the clay, they get trapped along the way. Once trapped, these molecules get organized in specific patterns within the clay. This process is compared to how our genes organize things. Just like genes tell our bodies how to arrange different parts, the clay patches organize molecules. This theory was created back in the 80s, although it was very controversial at the time. We need more investigation to figure out whether this is true or not. Ancient people could have been onto something when they said that we all started with Zeus's lightning. Life itself is a chemical reaction, and it needs energy. Without energy, nothing happens. Cells are the building blocks of life. You can picture these cells as tiny factories bustling with activity, constantly working to keep you alive. Just like every factory needs a power source to keep its machines running smoothly, they need energy to do their job. In the world of cells, that power source is something called ATP, which stands for adenosine triphosphate. It's an organic molecule. There are also some backup generators with fancy names like thioesters, acyl phosphates, and reduced ferredoxin. They basically work like extra boosts. When life first started, it needed energy to make complex stuff like proteins and DNA. Back then, this energy came from the environment. It could be light, heat, chemicals, or even lightning. That lightning might have kick-started life. Back in the 1950s, scientists did something called the Miller-Urey experiment. They zapped a mix of gases that mimicked Earth's early atmosphere with electric sparks. Suddenly, that caused amino acids and sugars, the basic stuff of life, to pop out. All living things share a special code called DNA, the genetic code. It's one of the oldest and most important things about life. And we think this code existed in the very first forms of life too. This code is quite tricky. It involves putting the right building blocks, amino acids, together in the right order. And there are special molecules called tRNA and mRNA that help with this process. The early version of this code was probably simpler than what we have now. It might have used shorter instructions like using just 2 letters instead of 3. Scientists are still figuring out how DNA first appeared at all. Some think it might have started alongside metabolism, where certain molecules helped put the right building blocks together. Now, they think that the secret to understanding how DNA and proteins are formed lies in looking at RNA. RNA is a versatile player, a molecule that can do some of the jobs of both DNA and proteins. In the past, it could have been the star before DNA and proteins took over. And even though they're the main players now, RNA still has important roles in living things. For example, it can switch genes on and off, controlling how cells behave. But then comes the next question. How did RNA come to be? Well, we need to look for even simpler origins. RNA are big and complicated molecules, but life could have begun with smaller ones bumping into each other and starting chemical reactions. These reactions might have happened inside tiny capsules that acted like cell membranes. Over time, they might have evolved into more complex ones that could do the job better. In other words, life could have started with a basic recipe and slowly added more ingredients. Every living thing is made of carbon. Carbon is an essential life block. It's the stuff that makes molecules, and they form cells, tissues, and organs. Earth was very different many years ago. There were no plants or trees, and the air was different too. Instead of the oxygen we breathe now, there were gases like hydrogen, nitrogen, hydrogen sulfide, and of course, carbon dioxide, which contained carbon. In this ancient world, life might have started in a way where organisms didn't eat other organisms for energy. Perhaps they made their own food from these simple chemicals. They could eat this carbon dioxide, kind of like plants do today, and this is where they receive their carbon from. We call this autotrophic origin. They think that certain metals like iron and nickel, along with minerals containing them, played a big role in this process. These metals and minerals acted like assistants, helping chemical reactions happen that were important for life to begin. They were found all over the Earth back then, especially in places where there wasn't much oxygen. And finally, we have a wild theory that life didn't start on Earth at all. It could have been brought to us from somewhere else. Rocks from Mars sometimes get blasted into space by big cosmic collisions. Some of these rocks have ended up on Earth, carrying tiny microbes with them. So maybe, while we search for life on Mars, it could have been the red planet that started our very own life. Or maybe it wasn't Mars. Others suggest that life might have hitched a ride on comets from other star systems, traveling through space until they landed here. But if life did come from somewhere else, it just raises more questions. For example, how did life start in space in the first place? This is why scientists are a bit skeptical about this idea, which is called panspermia. In any case, the origins of life are a huge mystery, and we'll need decades of research to figure out the full answer.
In November 2020, a wave the height of a 4-story building was recorded off the coast of Vancouver Island, Canada. The team at Marine Labs, the company that operates the buoy that got caught in it, couldn't believe the data they saw. Everything was normal, then, unexpectedly, a vast force came, pulled the buoy down, and then sent it up to a peak before taking it even deeper. The probability for such a huge wave to form is once in 1,300 years, so they had to be sure it wasn't a technical mistake. Marine Lab sent the data to a rogue wave scientist at the University of Vancouver. They analyzed and validated the findings and shared them in February 2022. The wave officially became the most extreme rogue wave ever officially recorded, as it was 3 times the height of waves around it. Luckily, this giant didn't leave any damage, as it happened too far offshore. For centuries, rogue waves were believed to be real only in the stories of sailors. Christopher Columbus himself mentioned a rogue wave, but back then, it wasn't officially a thing. In August 1498, he was on his 3rd expedition to the Americas. As they were passing through a strait near Trinidad, a huge wave lifted the boats. They managed to survive and continue the journey, and the area is still known as the Mouths of the Dragon, named this way by Columbus. Back in 1826, a French scientist and naval officer was crossing the Indian Ocean on his ship, the Astrolabe. They got caught in a terrible storm and witnessed several waves over 80 feet tall. One of them was the height of a 10-story building. The crew lost one of its members, but the 4 of them, including the captain, made it to land and spread the story of the gigantic waves. But back then, scientists were sure waves couldn't be taller than 30 feet. So everyone took this story as a tale. Witnesses shared many other stories of giant waves coming out of nowhere, but scientists officially recognized the first rogue wave only in 1995. It went down in history as the Doppler wave, or the New Year's wave. This sea monster of the North Sea hit the Norwegian gas platform Dropner on New Year's Day. It reached a height of 84 feet. The waves surrounding it were twice as small. The rig was built to withstand waves up to 64 feet tall and had the most advanced sensors for its time. It became a sensation in the scientific world because it wasn't like any other type of wave they'd studied before. So they gave rogue waves an official definition. It's a wave more than twice as tall as others around it. These bad boys, also known as freak waves, monster waves, and episodic waves, can pop up lightning fast in a stormy sea or show up out of nowhere in calm waters. They have steep sides and a deep trough below, and look like a wall of water rising out of the sea. They're so intense that they can even swallow up rescue helicopters just trying to do their job. Rogue waves aren't the same as tsunamis. Tsunamis happen when there's a big shift in water, like an earthquake, volcanic eruption, or landslide. They mess with the entire water column. At sea, you might not even notice a tsunami cruising beneath you, but near the shore, as it hits shallow waters, those waves can shoot up to crazy heights. Rogue waves are formed at the surface level, although sometimes they can form deep below, and these are called rogue internal waves. Scientists and sailors singled out some statistics. Rogue waves more often form when wave trains run into fast ocean currents. The coast of South Africa is one good place for that. There are concerns that these water beasts may happen more often in the future because there's more energy in the atmosphere and ocean. It means larger and more frequent rogue waves and more ships lost at sea. Rogue waves aren't limited to oceans and can even occur in lakes. Lake Superior witnesses something that got the name Three Sisters. It's a series of 3 large waves, one after another. The second wave covers the ship decks before the first one is gone. The third wave jumps in and adds extra water. These 3 sisters overload the ship. There's a theory that this phenomenon took down the steamship Edmund Fitzgerald in 1975. Rogue waves are also dangerous because they form rogue holes in the water. When the wave builds up, it draws in all the water around it. So, near the base, these holes can be very deep. If the bow or stern of a ship ends up in one, the ship can instantly sink. Some oceanographers believe that rogue waves are to blame for the disappearance of ships in the notorious Bermuda Triangle in the Atlantic Ocean. Storms from several directions converge in this mysterious area, so rogue waves are more likely to gain force here. And because they can reach a height of 100 feet, they can theoretically bring down an airplane, not just ships. There are 2 main theories trying to make sense of how rogue waves happen. First up, we've got the linear addition theory. Imagine waves cruising through the ocean at their own speeds. Now, when these waves cross paths, they team up and become stronger, cooking up a rogue wave. Then there's the nonlinear focusing theory. It says waves like to roll in groups, and when they spend time together, they share some energy. Sometimes, this energy exchange turns into a rogue wave. To predict the formation of these freaky waves, scientists would need an innovative radar system to keep a constant eye on the waves near a boat. They'd collect all the data and toss it into a fancy math model that paints a real-time picture of what the ocean surface looks like at that very moment. This model would need to do new calculations of the surface situation every 5 minutes. It would let the crew know if there were any extreme waves coming up in the next several minutes. Such a system doesn't exist yet, but as scientists measure more rogue waves, mathematicians may find a way to alert us of the upcoming rogue waves rising out of the water. Sometimes you can hear the term sneaker wave as a synonym for rogue waves, but oceanographers claim there's a difference. Rogue waves occur mostly in the ocean, and sneaker waves build up at the shore. They're also known as king waves and sleeper waves, and they roll up much faster than usual waves when they approach the beach. They always appear without warning after smaller waves and can be powerful. They can carry swimmers further away into the ocean. But the worst part is, they can also sweep you off your feet and into the water when you're casually strolling on a jetty or the beach, or on an outcropping nearby. Oregon State University researchers found that sneaker waves form in offshore storms that carry wind energy to the ocean surface. With all that energy, several waves unite and overlap into one beast that stands higher and goes further ashore than a regular wave. Another thing that makes them more dangerous is that, just like rogue waves, they're hard to predict. Fishers, surfers, and others who spend a lot of time by the water normally know when and what to escape when it comes to big waves. With sneaker waves, that logic doesn't work. There is no set time of the year when they're more active either, but putting together some data shows you're more likely to experience one of those somewhere between April and October, and the peak would be in October and November. Sneaker waves carry huge amounts of water, sand, and gravel. Those can fill up your shoes in a matter of seconds and sweep you off your feet if you're unlucky enough to be ashore at that moment. These sea monsters also have the power to move huge logs, which carries another hazard.
Oh wow, there's a hole in the bottom of the ocean! It seems that the ocean has a leak. But it's not like a leak you would expect, where water is flowing out. It's more like a spring since water is flowing in, not out. This unique leak is something we know as Pythia's oasis. A grad student was the one who accidentally discovered it. He noticed bubbles that were rising to the surface. Normally, bubbles in the ocean tell us there might be some hydrothermal vents, which are hotspots for some pretty cool things. These vents are actually like hot springs on the seafloor, but instead of bubbling with warm water, they release a fluid that has been superheated in the crust of our planet. When seawater seeps into these cracks and travels deep into the crust, it comes into contact with the extremely hot mantle. This heats seawater to very high temperatures, and as it moves back up towards the surface, it carries dissolved gases and minerals. When the hot fluid shoots out of the vents, it mixes with the surrounding seawater and quickly cools down. Just a short distance away from the vent, the temperature can drop to a comfortable 68 degrees Fahrenheit or so, which is, as it seems, exactly what some creatures like. And there are some real weirdos living down there in the darkness, like ghostly fish, giant red-tipped tube worms, and a unique type of shrimp with eyes on their back. And some of them, like tube worms and bacteria, rely on the chemicals and minerals released by the vents to survive in harsh conditions. But in this case, the bubbling water didn't come from a hydrothermal vent. It was there because of a spring, and that's a bit more concerning. You see, the water in this reservoir needs to stay where it is. If too much of it seeps out, there could be some serious consequences, especially for the surrounding area. You can see this unusual leak along the Cascadia subduction zone, which is a massive fault line off the Pacific Northwest coast. It's a place where two pretty big plates that make up Earth's crust come together and slide along each other. The water from Pythia's oasis kinda acts as a lubricant between these plates. You can think of the fault zone as an air hockey table. When the fluid pressure is high, it's like you've turned the air on. That means the friction between the plates is reduced, which allows the plates to move. But if the fluid pressure is lower, the two plates can lock together, which then leads to the buildup of stress. Not that they'll feel bad. In the context of tectonic plates, stress is some pressure or force that can cause deformation. And if this stress starts to build up, at some point, it's gotta go somewhere. When it's too much, it can trigger earthquakes and most likely, not small ones. For example, a release of stress in the Cascadia subduction zone could lead to a magnitude 9 earthquake. For comparison, the biggest earthquake we've ever recorded happened in Chile in 1960, and it had a magnitude of 9.5. The damage was enormous. So we hope the water will stay in its reservoir and keep maintaining the delicate balance between the tectonic plates. We've explored only 5% of the ocean. Who knows how many cool things are there at the bottom, waiting to be found? For example, check out these mysterious holes scientists have stumbled upon in the depths of the Atlantic Ocean, near the Azores. They're neatly aligned and are about 4 inches apart, or in some cases, even several feet. They resemble punctures left by a sewing machine. Some think these holes could have a biological origin. For instance, some fish may have made them while walking along the seafloor. Others believe we could be looking at something that's human-made, maybe left by a spiked tire. Of course, such holes are perfect for making up stories about creatures from other planets who allegedly made them. Or maybe even legendary monsters, like that one from Loch Ness. It's definitely hard to explain such symmetry of the holes, but one deep-sea biologist offered a pretty good explanation. He said there could be an animal burrowing beneath the sediment, and from time to time, it could make little chimneys just to get access to clean water circulation in its small burrow. I mean, there are sediment piles around the opening of each hole, and they do support the idea that something pushed the soil from below. But there's still no proof these holes are actually connected beneath the surface. And there are also a lot of things hidden at the bottom of the oceans and seas that ancient civilizations left us. For instance, archaeologists made a really cool discovery off the southern coast of Croatia, a road hidden under layers of sea mud that's 7,000 years old. They found the ancient road at the sunken Neolithic site of Solin. The site of Solin was a human-made island in ancient times, and an archaeologist discovered it 2 years ago. He was studying satellite images of the area around Korčula, one of the beautiful Croatian islands. When he realized there could be something interesting at the bottom of the sea, he dove into the water with his colleague. And under the surface of the Adriatic Sea, which is part of the Mediterranean Sea, at a depth of 13 to 16 feet, they found stone walls that were most likely part of some ancient settlement. The landmass where people built the settlement was separated from the main island by a narrow stretch of land. Luckily, this area is protected from big waves by the surrounding islands, so the site remained relatively well preserved. It's now hidden beneath the surface of the sea and covered in mud. But it's so exciting to imagine how people walked on that road nearly 7,000 years ago, visiting nearby settlements. If you want to see the weirdest creatures, you can always head to the bottom of the sea. Actually, scientists have determined there could be more than 30 potentially new species at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. They've collected them using their remote-controlled vehicle. That's a big step because until recently, they could only study such creatures through photographs. I'm talking about segmented worms, different types of coral, some invertebrates similar to centipedes, and many others. But there are also many old freaky creatures that we already know about that look like they came from sci-fi movies. Red octopus, blobfish. Okay, this one kinda looks normal until you raise it to the surface. The goblin shark, Sloane's viperfish, zombie worms. Ugh. Yeah, I hear ya. Let's move on. The seafloor hides things from space too. There are traces of rare forms of plutonium and iron at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. And what's awesome is that all this has come from space. These radioactive materials probably formed during some kind of cataclysmic event in space and eventually made their way out to our beautiful home planet. And this extraterrestrial debris most likely appeared on Earth within the past 10 million years. After it fell to the Pacific Ocean and settled at a depth of almost a mile, it became part of all those layers of rock down there. Plutonium is especially exciting for scientists. I mean, only tiny amounts of it have been found, hundreds of atoms maybe. But it's still remarkable because these atoms are created by exploding stars. Things like this can help us better understand how the universe produces elements heavier than iron, like plutonium, gold, uranium, and platinum. We're still not sure about the origins of these elements. For a long time, scientists believed that supernovae, which is when a star comes to its end in a fabulous explosion, were responsible for creating these heavy elements. But it seems it's not just that. Some other cosmic events, such as the collision of neutron stars, which are super dense collapsed stars, or some rare types of supernovae, could also be involved. Whoa, let me get my popcorn!
Antarctica. It was once a green land full of dinosaurs, but now it's a frozen continent bigger than that of the US that doesn't belong to anyone. It isn't hard to find. Wherever you go, just go south until you get to the big icy thing at the south pole of our planet. It lies within the Antarctic Circle, and it's the largest single mass of ice on Earth. The continent is bigger than the US and even bigger than all of Europe. And still, Antarctica was officially discovered recently. Scientists hadn't known of its existence until 1820. After the discovery, it took another 2 decades to confirm it was a whole new continent, and a few more decades after that to decide on a name. In Antarctica, anti means the opposite. So Antarctica literally means the opposite of the Arctic. Now, even before scientists discovered the land, ancient Greeks already theorized that there must be a southern continent to balance out the Arctic in the north. Also, some scientists who studied Polynesian artwork and oral history believe that Polynesians found the continent over a millennia before the Europeans did. Anyways, today we all know of this icy land at the South Pole. Because of its location, there are just 2 seasons there, summer and winter, and both last 6 months. In summer, it's a bit warmer, and the continent exists in pure daylight. And in winter, it's dark all day long. 98% of Antarctica is ice. This continent alone stores 60% of the planet's fresh water. And yet, despite all those water reserves, Antarctica is the biggest desert in the world. By definition, a desert is an area with sparse vegetation and little snow or rain. Notice that plenty of sand isn't a necessary condition here, even though the continent does have some sand and even sand dunes. It also gets a lot of wind. Antarctica is the windiest continent on Earth, and wind speeds can reach 200 miles per hour. That's even faster than hurricane winds. The little snow the land gets never melts. It just builds up over time, for centuries and millennia. So there's a thick ice layer there. This makes Antarctica full of hidden secrets. There's a whole new world underneath its ice. For example, there are a lot of mountains on the continent that are like 9,000 feet tall. It's taller than 3 Burj Khalifas stacked on top of each other, if we must, and that's currently the tallest skyscraper in the world. But we don't see all those mountains because they're all hidden under the ice sheet that's almost 16,000 feet thick. There's also a lake down there, beneath over 11,000 feet of snow. The lake is called Lake Vostok, named after Vostok Research Station, under which it's located. Originally, it was just a hypothesis. Over a century ago, a scientist suggested that the huge pressure created by tons of ice could decrease the melting point of ice in the lowest layers of the ice sheet, creating liquid water, which could form a lake. He didn't prove his ideas in his lifetime, but others continued his work and confirmed that this theory was true. There's also a canyon in Antarctica, hidden underneath huge masses of snow too. It's deeper than the Grand Canyon we have in Arizona. There is a mountain range that divides the continent into 2 parts, East Antarctica and West Antarctica. The western part of the continent is experiencing higher temperatures and is starting to melt. If West Antarctica melts and releases its stored water, it will raise the average global sea level by about 16 feet. That will be enough for some cities all over the world to completely disappear. Perhaps the first to turn into a water world will be Thailand's capital, Bangkok. which is just 5 feet above sea level. Then it will be Amsterdam in the Netherlands, followed by Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, Cardiff in the UK, and New Orleans in the US. People do a lot of work in Antarctica now, residing there for many months at a time to study this mystery of a continent. Over the years, even a few children were born there. But it's not a country, and the land doesn't belong to anyone. It's governed by the Antarctic Treaty System, an agreement of peaceful research and collaboration that suspends all territorial claims. It was first signed by 12 nations, and now there are 59 supporters, half of whom have decision-making powers. The continent is occupied all year round by researchers from all over the world. There are about 5,000 people living there in summer and about 1,000 in winter. Yet no one is a permanent resident there. People come and go, and the scientists take turns spending time there. The average yearly temperature there is negative 30 degrees. But there was a time when Antarctica was about as warm as Melbourne, Australia is today. It was about 40 to 50 million years ago. I wasn't around then. But the continent had green forests and dinosaurs roaming its land, chilling in the sun in a 63-degree Fahrenheit environment. That was before penguins. In our age, it's so cold that you won't even find any trees or bushes in Antarctica, just the snow. The only plants that can thrive in such extreme temperatures are lichens, moss, and algae. People can't stand such freezing conditions for lengthy periods of time either, so the continent has never had any indigenous population. Well, that is, if we don't count penguins, seals, whales, and a few other types of birds that live there now. Antarctica's fauna is the scariest and least diverse on the planet because only a few organisms can withstand its harsh conditions and because non-natives aren't allowed to be brought there. So, if you decide to travel to Antarctica with your cat, well, you can't. Hey, I don't make the rules. But those few species that live on the South Pole totally own the place. There are no more than 5,000 people there and around 20 million penguins. They are a kind of settlers, though. Penguins' first ancestors lived in Australia and New Zealand. There are still a few penguin species there, including the smallest penguin on Earth that is just 1 foot tall. Still, most of the penguins migrated to Antarctica at some point, possibly because they were attracted by the greater food supply there. It's not the cold that made them like the land. It turns out, most penguins leave the continent when the summer ends. The only ones that stay there are male emperor penguins, and they do it to warm and protect eggs left by their mates. But where do all the other penguins go? At first it was a big mystery even to scientists, but then they attached some tiny location devices to the legs of a few of these animals and figured it out. Penguins go to live in the southern oceans while it's too cold in Antarctica. None of them go ashore for half a year until they get back to the continent. When they come back, it's when those eggs, left for male penguins to nurture, start hatching, and so penguin families can be together when it happens. Penguins eat different fish, and the ocean is full of those despite its cold temperature. In some areas, water can reach below freezing temperatures because it's salty. But fish don't freeze there because they have antifreeze proteins in their bodies. Then there are also about 1 million seals in Antarctica. They like fish too, and they can hold their breath underwater for 2 hours. They see way better underwater than in the bright light of the day, and they also use their whiskers to locate food. Their breathing holes in the ice can freeze while seals are away, and they must use their teeth to make a new one. Seals can even sleep underwater and then resurface occasionally to get some air without waking up. I can appreciate that.
There's a tiny island surrounded by the stunning clear Red Sea and a bustling underwater world. Zabargad, also known as St. John's Island, has no trees and consists mostly of peridotite, which is rich in peridot. And before you Google it, peridotite is a gemstone that has the nickname the Evening Emerald because of its sparkling green hue. Some historians believe Cleopatra herself loved peridots, and that lady could afford any jewels in the world. Geologists believe peridot forms as a result of the spreading of the seafloor. When the Earth's crust decides to part ways, rocks from deep down get pushed up to the surface. That's exactly how our treasure island formed. The African and the Asiatic continental plates bumped into each other, and rocks in the lower crust went above sea level. Peridot also comes from meteorites that have crashed into Earth, but that's really rare. Its color ranges from a brown-green color to yellowish-green to pure green. Yellowish-green is the most common shade you'll see in jewelry. This color is possible thanks to a good amount of iron in the stone. The deposits of this beauty are spread all across the world, from Vietnam to Arizona and Hawaii, Tanzania, South Africa, Sri Lanka, and Norway. And then, of course, there's a bargod. So, this place is geologically unique as it's an island built of uplifted mantle, and it's also the oldest and longest known source of peridots in the world. The first people came here for the gemstones many centuries ago. Famous Roman philosopher Pliny the Elder mentioned in his writings that pirates had discovered Zabargod's treasures in the year 500 before the current era. The beautiful green rocks made their way to Queen Bernice of the Roman Empire. They came from the ancient trading port Berenike on the edge of Egypt's eastern desert. When the city fell in the 6th century, all work stopped, and the island with all its treasures stood alone for hundreds of years. In the 19th century, British explorers found the beautiful green island in the Red Sea and figured out it was the one described by Pliny the Elder a long time ago. Turkey did some mining here in the 20th century. Over just 4 years, they managed to collect over $2 million in peridots. They sent the gemstones to France for cutting. The work conditions on the island were nothing like a tropical fairy tale you could imagine. There was no drinking water for workers, so they had to install a gas-powered water condenser. Now, this territory belongs to the Elba National Park System. Most people come here to see the underwater beauties of the reefs, but if you look above the water, you can still see some beautiful sparkling peridots. If Christmas Island in Australia is on your travel list, plan the trip wisely. If you end up there in October or November when the wet season begins, you won't be able to enjoy a walk around. Red crabs cover the whole island like a blanket. And it's not one of those fluffy blankets you want to wrap yourself into. Over 100 million crabs are on a mission to reach the shore alive, marking a crucial phase in their life cycle. For the majority of the year, these red crabs reside in burrows and rock crevices. They have fruits, berries, fallen leaves, and various organic matter to keep them going. But when the dry season is over and the moon is in a specific phase, they know it's time to go. When they reach the coast of the Indian Ocean after several days of migration, they create deep burrows where females will eventually hatch their eggs. Once the burrows are ready, the male crabs return to the rainforests and the females stay at the beach for at least 12 days to keep the family going. The new parents are so smart, they follow the moon to pick the perfect moment with a milder tide to carry their eggs to the water. Once they hatch, the crabs bring their new family members back inland. There, they wait for the rainy season again to keep the circle of life going. To safeguard this magic, authorities close road in areas where crab migration takes place. Japan has a brand new addition to its archipelago. The world's newest landmass literally popped up in November 2023. This unnamed island is just over 300 feet in diameter. It's made of pumice and tuff left by an undersea volcano that kicked off its eruptions in October. The volcanic hustle has quieted down since then, and the waves are eroding chunks of the newly found land. Without lava flows to create a sturdy protective crust over the soft volcanic debris, the future of this freshly formed island is unstable. Similar islands had popped up before but were short-lived and vanished once volcanic activity ceased. An island born in 2021 the same way is still visible today though, so the newborn island might have some life prospects. If not, we're likely to see more territories like this. Japan is super rich in active volcanoes on land, with over 100 in its collection. If you make friends with the Uros people living in the Lake Titicaca area and ask them for their address to send a postcard, they will have a hard time answering. Their ancestors from more than 500 years ago came up with a brilliant invention to protect themselves from the Incas. They built islands from totora roots and reeds that could be moved away from danger deep into the lake. Totora plants help the local community a lot since it's water resistant and is used for all sorts of things, from building boats to roofs and mattresses. The islets are even edible, and the flowers of the plant they're made of are used for tea. So there are around 120 islets still preserved, and over 1,000 people can live on them. From 2 to 6 families share one islet home. Since there's no need to run away from the Incas anymore, they need to make sure the islets stay in one place. Every 15 to 20 days, the reeds forming the islets decay and need to be replaced. To prevent constant drifting, locals use eucalyptus rods as anchors, firmly securing the islets. Despite their small size, these islets have 2 spoken languages. The residents craft their fabric and create stunning outfits. Solar panels provide sufficient power for them to have light and even TVs. The main islet has a radio station, and the locals have embraced tourism. You can make a reservation online and experience the floating life yourself. Some islands pop out of nowhere, and others disappear without a trace. One of the most famous so-called phantom islands is High Brazil off the coast of Ireland. Before you ask, no, it doesn't have anything to do with Brazil. High is a variation of I, which means island, and Brazil comes from the root bres, meaning mighty, great, beautiful in Irish, and it gave the name to one of the local deities. This tiny mist-covered island was first mapped in 1325, but later attempts to pinpoint its exact location didn't come to one result. So, legend has it that the island appears only once in 7 years, and even those who claim to have seen it say they had just sailed right through it without bumping into any land. Captain John Nisbet shared the story of how he had not only spotted High Brazil, but got stranded on it with his crew. According to him, the island boasted a castle and was mostly uninhabited. There was even an encounter with an ancient grave gentleman who shared the island's ancient history over a lavish feast. In the late 15th century, a series of expeditions set sail from Bristol to find the famous island. All attempts failed, and High Brazil disappeared from the maps in 1865. We might never find out if it was there in the first place, but